this meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn to executive session? Motion by Diane, second by Eric.
It's anticipated that we'll be returning to open session and
At 6:30.
Yeah, at 6:30. Okay. All
you.
those in favor?
Oh, yeah, we do need to
And then, good.
close.
So we are now back from our executive session where we had discussed security with Captain Tompkins and discussion with legal counsel on policy 5152. I'd like to take a motion to return to public session. Diane in a second. Kristen, thank you. We are now, all those in favor? We're now back in public session. Thank you. No, 6. 6 tonight. I just need a number. Great. Thank you. And if I can ask everyone to please stand for the
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I can actually please ask everyone to remain standing and have a moment of silence for our student Oscar Gonzalez. Thank you. Sorry, just gonna grab paper. Okay, so, thank you everyone for coming. We are going to start tonight with our public hearing on our Smart Schools bond. Take it away.
I prepared a couple things just since there were some comments that on the form that was posted online, and I wanted to share those just so that we had an opportunity for the board to hear what some of those public comments were from perhaps people that weren't able to make it this evening. Just a brief overview, the Smart Schools investment plan is online. It is $180,000, which is what's remaining of $1.6 million that was awarded to Brewster as part of a $2 billion bond act with New York State. I'm going to get back to this if we have questions about NDI or the smart boards, but I want to add, I will go into this really quickly. So the two main things that we're proposing to put this money into is a virtual desktop infrastructure. And just for those of you that are unfamiliar with what that is, it is basically taking putting all of the applications, operating systems on a server, and then allowing any other device to access it. So just like we access Google Apps in the cloud, it's existing on a server someplace else, and we're getting to it from a browser. That's really the same way that you access a website. All of that is existing somewhere else. We put it on our server in here. It really does a number of things. So it allows us to maintain just one image, not 50. Reduces the support cost tremendously because of the reduced number of additional devices that we would need. We can repurpose old machines. So if we have devices that don't have the specs to be able to run Adobe Creative Suite, then we can definitely add things, use those for in this way with less technical specs. Students would be able to access these apps from home. We can use PC applications on a Chromebook, and it does increase the security. The other portion of the Smart Schools Bond Act was for new interactive displays and smart boards, that kind of the Kleenex term that most people use to refer to all of the interactive displays. Just to clarify on what this is for the smartboard replacement, is that is not just a blanket replacement that we're going ahead and replacing all of them with the same new device. We are starting with the oldest ones, the ones that are broken or not interactive, or the display, the image is too dim. If you are ever here during the day, that image is really tough to see with this projector because, and in the classroom it's even more pronounced on some of these projectors and smartboards that we have. We're not replacing all with the same model. We're going into each room and determining whether we need a 65-inch or a 75-inch, whether it needs to be fully interactive, which is mostly in the elementary schools, partially interactive, middle school and high school, and some of them we really just need a display, something that's going to be up there but we're not interacting with. And so really being strategic in how we're deploying these and making our investments. So it's not just a blanket, oh, we're going to put this, the 75-inch fully interactive model in every single classroom. All right? And it will be spread out over the additional things for replacing the rest of those over 4 years. So there were 4 comments, and I just wanted to quickly address each one of those just with what was put on there. This is a specific comment about really continuing to fund our one-to-one Chromebook initiative. This is being addressed through a replacement cycle because we do have a number of Chromebooks that have been purchased already and that within just a couple of years are going to need to be replaced. So this is already being, or there's a plan in place to address those over each year so that we are continually replenishing that so that students have functional devices in their hands. So we will bring that up to one-to-one by the end of this year, and I wanted to be able to utilize this. The Smart Schools with the tech committee decided that there's a lot of interactive displays that have not been addressed while we've been beginning this one-to-one initiative. Asked if there was increase in personnel needed to support the technology, and one of the things that we're looking for is to reduce that the need for the support. One thing that Valerie has constantly pushed back on me is what are the different ways that you can use the technology in innovative ways to use less staff, to not need additional support staff, because we have increased the number of devices by over 3,000 in the school district just over the last 2 years. So that usually incurs a lot of additional staffing. We've been able to absorb it somewhat, but through BDI we're hoping that that's going to actually reduce our need for additional staff moving forward. This was regarding the smart boards and talking about borrowing the money through bonds right now and taking it out of the current budget. So there's 2 things I want to address about this. First of all, this is through the Smart Schools bond, and this is not taking out a bond. The district isn't taking out a bond to be able to pay for this. However, we are going to be looking at doing that moving forward to be able to get a consistent replacement. We right now are in a position where we have interactive display smart boards that are over 10 years old because there wasn't anything in place, and as we have situations like this year where the funds are low, and we say, well, we were going to replace all these devices, but we can't because now the budget got cut, and so we're trying to just focus on these things. So we're going to really look to, over the next 4 years, do some financing that will allow us to maintain a consistent replacement cycle, so we are not in that position of saying, oh, well, now we need to spend $2 million to replace all of these devices, and that we can replace them on a regular basis. So those are a couple of the things. So it's provided by the state and not a bond that the district has taken out. However, we will look to do that, to be able to, in small increments over the course of the next 4 years. And this was one comment that was talking about really focusing on good instruction. And I'm really happy to say that this isn't just technology for technology's sake. The vision that the tech committee has put forth really focuses on good, authentic, project-based and problem-based learning, getting students to be asking and answering their own questions in the classroom, and that's really where we've been focusing our instructional technology purchases, and we are also using that as part of our focus for the professional learning. So whether it's through project-based learning, we had a number of teachers that participated in the Buck Institute training over the course of 2 days this year. We're going to be really doing a turnkey of that and getting more teachers involved. Project Lead the Way has been expanded over the past few years, and that is really good hands-on authentic learning that kids are doing in the classroom. And really a lot of our professional learning is focused on the skills of Brewster graduate, of critical thinking, collaboration, communication, adaptability, perseverance. Those are the skills that we focus on. And it's not just about the technology, getting the new wow. It's about how do we use, what technology do we need to accomplish these more authentic learning texts. So that being said, those of you that have had a chance, I don't know if there's any opportunity for other comments that the public wants to make, or the board.
When do we, so this is another presentation, what's the next action?
At the next board meeting would be, I will present you with the final plan, and then we would be looking to, for you to approve that, and then I will submit it to the,
So
we
it'll be
will
on the
submit it to the
next agenda for approval based on the final presentation
Yeah.
that we can discuss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And if there's discussion of any changes or anything, then now would be the time, because then I can make those changes in there. If there's any adaptation, either based on those 4 responses, or if there's any other concerns, I can certainly make those changes in a final plan. But otherwise, then I would present to you the preliminary as a final plan next time.
Okay. And just, does anyone from the public?
I just got a question. You said we increased with the Google Chromes we have about 3,000. What percentage of that is now being insured by the parents, and how much is the school actually, district having to pick up? Because I know I pick up my son's and it gets shipped out, and he only had a loaner for a month. So I know
So-
you also said it was an increase in staff, so I was just curious how that played with the insurance.
So what we did new for this year, last year when we rolled out the Chromebooks, we did insurance through Worth Insurance, and that involved boxing up the device, sending it out, getting it repaired, bringing it back, and it was costly. It's $22 for each student per year, and so this year we were able to bring it in-house. And so what we've done is use those funds, and now we repair them in-house, and we'll be able to turn them around much quicker. So we use our existing staff to do those repairs on a daily basis, and it should only take about 1 or 2 days for repairs to
So I
be
was
back.
just curious
But-
if there was extra cost if we were
No.
doing it outside. And how
No,
much.
this is a way to cut the costs
Mhm.
to parents by doing it in-house. So-
And what percentages are the parents picking up on the insurance? Because I know 100% of the parents aren't paying for their child's, but what percentage is,
You mean,
That
what
is
percentage
not-
of parents chose to do the insurance?
yeah.
Um,
Do you even have an idea on how many?
Yes.
Because if the parents don't do it, that cost falls on the district, am I
No,
correct?
it doesn't. So that's part of why every parent and student had to sign the new Chromebook agreement, because it lays out the repair costs. So the cost falls on the parent. It's just like if you
Okay.
were able to and chose not to insure your car and you got in an accident, you'd have to repair it
Okay.
yourself. And so that's really the same thing, same idea. So
Okay, that was it.
yeah, so no, it doesn't, the cost doesn't fall on the district if they haven't done it. It falls back onto the parent. And then they get, the student gets a loaner till those repairs get paid for and get complete.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to administrator remarks, and, Ms. Gosh, start on the side. Next time we'll go back. Mixing up.
Last week was our foundational training for the 2 mathematics curricular resources that we are piloting at the K-5 level this school year, and those resources are Math and Focus and Envision. An explanatory letter will be sent out to the community tomorrow, which outlines the history of what we have used previously and are still using in some cases, it explains sort of the why, why are we having this conversation at this particular time. It gives a little bit of information about how we're planning to assess these resources. And then it also discusses some ways that we'll be soliciting feedback from students, parents, teachers, and administrators. So we plan on, in October, having what we're calling a curriculum conversation, which is separate from a board meeting, but where we sit down and have a two-way conversation with parents about the resources that their son or daughter will have in their classroom. So I would like to thank all the teachers, and this is Lori Gillette is here from CU Star, who's been instrumental in helping get this off the ground. I'd like to thank all the teachers who volunteered to engage in this pilot, and we look forward to updating you in the future. And second, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the work that the administrators did to get not these administrators, those administrators at the building levels to get ready for opening day and for the entire school year. I was sharing with Mrs. Horler and Dr. Henning Piedmont yesterday when we were walking through that. I remember as a principal that first day you held your breath the whole day, hoping that you didn't double book a room or forget a class. And at each building it went off without a hitch logistically, and it's a testament to the care and the expertise of our principals, assistant principals, directors, and assistant directors. That concludes my comments.
Can I just ask, is a letter going to go out or?
Tomorrow.
The dates? Okay.
Yes, with the curricular.
Yeah.
Yes, it's October 11th, but it's in the letter as well.
I was writing and I missed it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, Victor? Yes.
Hi, good evening. Just wanted to give an update regarding the state and local tax deduction that New York State attempted to pass through the charitable funds contribution. The IRS recently ruled that New York's attempt to circumvent the new federal tax laws would not be allowable for IRS federal tax purposes. Our auditors, O'Connor Davies, met with our audit committee back in May, and they hinted that the IRS would likely be making this ruling. They will also be at our board meeting later in October, and I'll ask them also to present on the charitable funds contribution. At this time, the IRS is not allowing New York residents to deduct their state and local taxes. However, it's likely that New York State, along with New Jersey and Connecticut, will sue the federal government, so it's not completely dead, but for all intents and purposes, it's definitely going to be on hold for the foreseeable future. Quick update regarding residency verification. Through August 31st, 2,305 students have presented residency verification, which is approximately 75% of our enrollment. Just wanted to remind the community that appointments are available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. as well as walk-ins here at the district office Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Fridays, and we recently sent out a communication with regard to drop-box locations throughout the district in the town of Southeast, town of Patterson, Village of Brewster, and Catholic Charities, and you could visit our website for more information about those locations, including their physical address and their hours.
Victor, can I just ask, because I've read through this many times and I've heard many talks, but ultimately with the SALT index, what's the effect on a district and a public school system or the town?
So the impact, there's no impact on the school district, but individuals in the past, if you would itemize your deductions on your federal income tax, you would be able to get a benefit for all of your property taxes paid. With the new federal tax laws, the standard deduction has been increased to the point where the itemized deductions, in most cases, you wouldn't get that same benefit. So, for example, in the past, if the standard deduction was, say, $5,000 and you paid $10,000 in property taxes, you'd be able to deduct the $10,000 in property taxes. Now they're limiting the amount that you can deduct in property taxes to just $10,000. So if you pay, if you pay $12,000, you're only going to get the benefit of the 10.
Right.
However, they also significantly increase the standard deduction. So in a lot of cases, your property taxes paid wouldn't factor into your federal income tax preparation. It's very complicated, and again.
I've read it like 3 times.
Very
now.
complicated.
No,
And-
stop reading.
Don't read it.
And we'll have, and on October 23rd, our financial statements will be presented to the Board of Ed, and I'll also ask our attorneys to provide commentary on it, which I'm sure will be extremely boring and confusing, but
Okay,
they are
thank you.
the experts in it.
Okay. Kathleen?
Good evening. I would just like to mention a few appointments on tonight's consent agenda. At CV Star, Jessica Forehand is being recommended for the relief replacement for Barbara O'Neill Eustace, and Corinne Phillips is being recommended to replace Maggie Campiello. Also, Dana Dudones is being recommended for appointment to a part-time AIS math teacher position at JFK, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to these new employees. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Good evening, Board Trustees. Welcome back to everyone. It's a bittersweet welcome back. As Victor, Michelle, Kathy and I were around yesterday visiting all the schools and seeing everyone back, you know, obviously that one student couldn't come back, and that was Oscar Gonzalez. For those who knew Oscar, you loved Oscar. He was a lovely young man, always smiling, always hopeful, always rallying his friends and others. He was a leader, and anyone that you spoke to characterized Oscar in that manner. He was never without a smile. So it was a tragic loss for the district, and everyone, as in the Brewster tradition, rallies around to help each other. All the counselors, all the staff in the district, custodial and services, clerical, monitors, obviously the counseling team, administrators. Everyone has really been what we do in the district, and what we unfortunately have had to do when we have these circumstances that none of us ever dream of. Who thinks about a student dying tragically? But what we've done is our best, which is to honor his memory by making sure that we think about the good things and cherish each other and look for the good, because that's what Oscar did. Oscar looked for the good. Michelle, myself, Ms. Cunningham, Mr. Niles, Ms. Masika, anyone else that I missed who were around the days who attended the memorial service last night that was actually organized by students, organized by Oscar's friends. It was at the soccer field near in the village near the train station. Balloons were released and the crowd clapped, which is what the family wanted, as sort of a send-off for Oscar. We were notified last night that his wake will be tomorrow at 4 p.m. at Eau Claire Cox and Sinatra Funeral Home in Mount Kisco, which is 262 East Main Street, from 4 to 8 p.m. We will be providing counseling services, we have been providing since Tuesday, to our students on Saturday and Sunday from 9 to 1 p.m. At Brewster High School in the Innovation Learning Center, the ILC. On Saturday, Mrs. Alvarez and Ms. Simmons will be there, along with Ms. Sullivan. On Sunday, Mrs. Alvarez and Mrs. Joanna Biaggi, who's a counselor at the middle school, will be there, along with Mrs. Hoyler, who will be there as well. And of course, we have other staff who are at the front desk. Tina and Peggy, both from the middle school, are helping out, as well as custodial staff. Mary Smith will have a dispatcher on hand, so that for any student who doesn't have a ride into the high school, they can call our dispatcher, and we'll dispatch a bus to pick the child up and to take the child home. So that's what we're doing to make sure that we prepare and care for children. We're also hoping that Addie and Leah will return. They're the 2 golden retriever comfort dogs that were in our district 2 years ago, and they make a big difference. If you see them, they really make a big difference in a situation like this. So we're hoping that we'll be able to have one or both of them on Saturday or Sunday. So we're waiting to hear back from the organization that provides them. So again, we certainly had not, ever thought in our wildest dreams that we'd be opening the school year with this tragedy, but we will do it, as I said, what we've always done, which is to move ahead, care for each other, and, go deep into our levels of compassion and kindness so that we can, we can get through this. I want to welcome Deputy Keith Simone, who replaces Deputy Nooner. No one can actually really replace Deputy Nooner, but Keith Simone is here, and if you have seen him, you'll see that he certainly will fit into the middle school environment. I want to thank the Brewster Education Foundation for providing a grant that allowed us to purchase the plaques for our Celebrate Brewster Awards, which we will be presenting at the September 25th board meeting. That unfortunately the convocation had to be canceled, which it needed to be canceled because obviously we had to care for our students and our staff. We will also interview the 2 student representatives to the Board of Education, so hopefully at the September 25th board meeting we will have those students seated. I'd also like to welcome and congratulate Ms. Maggie Andriella, who's here. She was appointed as the assistant to the principal at CD Star Middle School, and we also CD Star Intermediate School. And we'd also again like to acknowledge that Mrs. Cherry, who's decided to stay for a year, is also here, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide leadership that will really support our goals at CD Star. And I think that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm next. And you'll hear later, we discuss our district and board goals, the efforts we're making and going to continue to make for our community and for our school district. But one of the changes that we're looking to do is for me to use this particular time to be able to respond to comments that come in from the community and do any particular updates that I need to update as far as political climate. So just to recap from our previous meeting, from the comments that were presented, there was a question on, there were potholes at the high school, and we can report they've been built. Yes, no more potholes. If there are any others, let us know. There was a question regarding our communications. We've had a discussion on our communications plan for our district and potentially hiring someone to help us in that work. And we're going to continue that discussion today. So some of the answers will come from that to the questions from last meeting. And let's see, there was a question regarding BOCES specifically and how they run their interview process for the superintendent search. I will cover that as well later on in the agenda. And there were some questions on residency and will there be a cost analysis? There will be, continue to be one. We present them as we have our updates. There will be overall analysis as we enter budget season because we need to know where we stand with that. And so our meetings will be a place of that information as well as other updates that we send out to the public. And it will have an overall, review and recap of everything that we've learned through the process. There was a question specifically about, if residents choose to not register their students, what happens, and it's outlined in our procedures. And one of the things that Victor has discussed is that, the burden of proof rests on the district, and so we would need to take, no student would ever be withheld from attending school, and it would be on us to follow up on any questions we continue to have with any residents. And there was another question regarding people who live in areas where they pay taxes to 2 different towns or states, and they pay taxes to both. If you have property that borders both, your taxes are paid to both, and it's broken down according to how the different towns make their assessments, and that would be case specific to the particular property. And there was also a question regarding potential violations in student information. And the answer to that is that if we were to determine that there were any such violations of any employee, relaying information that was confidential, that shouldn't be, that the district may take legal action against them. And, I call the lawyers to make sure I have the right language on that, but that is in fact what would happen. And I think those were primarily the things that were raised. So we're going to continue to work on how we can best communicate, and I'll discuss it again later during our goals portion, how we can allow for better and more effective question-answer type periods, because at our board meeting, we need to do the business of the district. And there's a lot to do, as you see from the agendas, but we want to make sure that we offer time for the community to engage with us and get answers. So we're going to work on different ways to make that very effective for everyone. So bear with us as we work through it. And I know one of the things that we discussed, and again I'll mention later, is we're going to start with a survey out to the public that we're going to work on putting together soon, and look for input on ideas from how the community thinks we can be most effective in that as well. Okay, so those are my comments for today. And what I'd like to do, though, now move on to our presentations, recognition, discussion. But I would like to get a motion to amend this portion to add a number 7, so that we may discuss policy 5152 to follow up with our conversation we had with our attorneys earlier. So Carrie, and a second, please, Diane. Thank you. So we're going to amend the agenda to add number 7, policy 5152 discussion, and that's the policy for admission of non-resident students. Okay, so we begin with one, Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES communications contract, Ellen Lane and Eric Gross contract.
Right. So Ellen Lane is here. The board reviewed a contract that was submitted by Ellen, and there were, at our last board meeting, there was a question about what exactly the word publicity meant in the contract. What did that entail? At the same time, there was a conversation and a discussion about the role that Eric Gross played in terms of the kinds of activities that he was engaged in, and whether there was any redundancy, would there be any redundancy between the proposed Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES contract and the work that he does. Eric chose not to be here. He said that he would do whatever it is that the board decides it wants to do. If you want to call upon him for any special kind of coverage, he'd be happy to come, but he understands what the conversation, the nature of the conversation and why we're having it. And so at this point, it's a matter of really having Ellen Lane describe for you what exactly similar districts that have chosen this service actually do. What does a person do in the district that comes in as a communication specialist? What types of activities do they cover? What are the products associated with covering those activities, and anything else that would be helpful to the board to understand what exactly it is that what services we're receiving for the contract. And again, this person, a communication specialist, in this particular contract would be in the district for 2 days, covering primarily the types of things that Eric covers. So whether it's an athletic event, after school, club, a college agreement to play athletics, any number of events would be appropriate. But also making sure that those events are part of our social media in ways in which we haven't paid as much attention to our presence there. as well as electronic newsletters, which, as I understand from Eric, went by the wayside a number of years ago because of the expense associated with creating those, and those were more traditional paper-based newsletters that were also mail, so naturally that was costly, so that was, that particular part of his contract hasn't been in place for many years. This is an opportunity for us to look at other ways to promote the really wonderful things that are happening in the district. And Ellen can describe for us, sort of what that looks like in terms of work that's underway in other districts.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me back. These are lists of tasks. I asked 3 of my specialists. I have people in several districts, but I asked 3 of them to just do a bulleted list of their activities, and you're going to see a lot of overlap, obviously. But they also vary a bit from one district to the other because we pride ourselves on responding to each district's unique personality and needs. So, for example, in Cortona, Lewisboro, our communications specialist is the one who not only creates content, but who posts it to the website. And she was active in migrating all of the old content from the old website to the new one. The new one is one of the boards because it's really quite a beautiful site. This is Cortona, Lewisboro. So she does that. In other districts, a technology person does it. And the differences are also reflect how much time a person is spending in the districts. Every district is not contracting for the same number of days per week. In Croton Harmon, Evelyn McCormick is our specialist, and she does a lot more work with the Board of Education than we typically do. She attends administrative council meetings, communication meetings, and she helps a lot with their messaging and their communications. So that's unique to Croton. What all of the specialists do is create content. And in the old days, we would have called it storytelling or reporting on stories. The 2 days that the person's here, she would check in with the administrators, visit every school building. She's going to get to know the people in the main office. She's going to get to know teachers. She's probably even going to get to know children. And she's going to come upon stories. We're not going to wait for you to tell us this is today's story. In fact, that's a very bad model. She's going to find the story. So she's walking down the hall in CV Star and sees a class that looks really engaged and the kids are super into whatever it is they're doing. Probably going to stick her head in there, take some pictures, ask the teacher what's going on. And then she's going to have the sophistication to take that lesson and bring it back and tie it to your strategic plan. What is it? Because there's got to be a connection. I mean, I know your teachers are working very hard to help all of the children in the district develop the core competencies that you call for in your strategic plan to create 21st century learners and citizens. So that layer is going to be in there too, which is not something that a non-professional would really know how to bring home. All of the writers on my staff are outstanding writers. They have incredible credentials. I have the former national editor for the Associated Press on my staff. I have 2 former broadcast journalists on my staff. I have the former copy editor copy chief for Vogue magazine. They're all consummate professionals. The person I have in mind for your district is a beautiful writer. She's a blogger on parenting issues. She will paint a picture of this place that will make parents happy that their children have these schools at their disposal, and that will help people understand what goes on here during the day. So they're going to be primarily telling stories, and then how do you tell them? Well, your audience is not all reading the Putnam County Courier or the Gannett paper, the Journal News. I mean, I love newspapers and subscribe to 3 myself, so I'm not against them. But unfortunately, newspaper readership is way down. And you can't find your whole audience in any one place. They're not all on Facebook, although a very large portion of moms are on Facebook, for sure. They're not all on Twitter, they're not all looking at YouTube or coming to your website on a regular basis. They're scattered, they're dispersed. And so we have to tell the stories in all of those venues. We can't be in just one place. I think Eric's stories are wonderful. And Eric does the work he does in MAYPAC, and we also serve MAYPAC. So we don't really step on each other's toes, or I don't think the services are redundant in any way. So we would take those stories. Some things are just going to be 140 characters or 280 characters on Twitter, and it's the picture tells the story. Some of them we put together in something called an Adobe Spark page, which I'd have to log in, but I have links to show some examples. And that's a collection of photo and text, and it's very effective for posting on websites and posting on Facebook pages to tell a story. One of the ones that I included is in Byram Hills. The students paint these elaborate murals that are tied to the curriculum in the hallways. And it's a massive 2-year project for each one. So the latest one was on famous scientists, and we did an Adobe Spark story where there's pictures of these gorgeous murals and text explaining the whole process. They're going to do silly little videos, like the cell phone. We had a student doing a local riff of a song from Hamilton. That was in the school district. And that's one of the links that I have. I can go and pull those up for you. But we're going to be putting the same content in different formats in electronic newsletters, which will aggregate what's been written, in press releases that we'll send out to local media like the Courier, and some of them will get used when there's space for them, some of them won't. We'll put it on Facebook. We'll package it in a way that it can go in your news feed on the website. So when we're done, we should get everybody, because whatever your preferred method of being informed about the school district is, we'll be there. And that's why we're not really duplicating anyone else's efforts. This is very unique. I am always available for if there's something that happens here for crisis communications. But to give you an example of some things that people on my staff have done, a couple of years ago, Hendrick Hudson Schools had 2 or 3 days running where there were telephoned threats. They were very serious. They had to do a lockdown of the high school campus. The communications specialist who works out of Ham Hud 3 days a week was in an office that was commandeered to become the war room with the superintendent throughout the entire thing. And she kept updating the public via Facebook and Twitter on what was going on. And when it was all over, Joe Hochreiter, the superintendent in that district, was praised for his transparency. He was praised by parents for keeping them informed the way he did. He did it in concert. It was done in concert with law enforcement, so that we weren't saying anything that would jeopardize law enforcement's response to the incident. Yesterday in one of our districts, there were massive transportation problems. Everybody's used to that, the opening of school, some buses are late, some don't come on time, what have you. This was more than the usual problem. Parents were irate. The person assigned to that district spent the day not just taking first day of school pictures, but answering parents' phone calls and preparing a statement for the district to put out to parents. And followed that all day long, continue to follow it today. If something, again, I'm always there for you, so if it's one of the days the person's not in district, you can still get assistance through a crisis. But when you're on campus, they could be in your war room. They could be answering the phone with the irate parents. So communication specialists fill a lot of needs. When we say publicity in the contract, it just means a communication specialist's time. That's really how we use the word.
Can I ask two
Sure,
questions?
ask questions.
Touched on. So it sounds like from these many districts, you will tailor to the needs of the district.
Yes.
Are there certain areas that you won't do, or things that you're just, we need to draw a line with certain types of interactions with social media, or are there certain areas that are, you're willing to go into, or is it just really, as we discover needs in our district, that we can work with you on?
We really respond to you. The one thing I caution districts on, and I do it all the time, is that when someone's in district, there is a tendency for district leadership to start to look to that person for, well, Susie can be the liaison to the PTA. Susie can attend the meeting on the politeness initiative. Well, if she does all those things, just making up names, obviously, she's not interviewing children. She's not taking pictures. She's not posting during those hours, you know what I mean? So I think you should try to keep your use of the person to the things that they have real expertise in, because that's how you're getting the most value for your investment in contracting with us. But we're going to respond to the unique personality of this district and to the unique needs of the district, and use those skills the best we can to serve.
So I think you answered it, but I just want to be clear. If this person's gonna be in district, I think it said somewhere, 2 days a week?
2 days.
Yes.
That's when they do work for the district. So they're not, if they're in the BOCES office Wednesday and Thursday and here Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, unless something specific happens that we call upon them for, they're not working on Brewster-related work.
No, they're not working on Brewster stuff. They're working on Brewster stuff when
When
they're
they're
here. I tell everyone that gets hired that it's in their interest to be a bit flexible. I mean, we can't treat it like a retail employee who finds out every Sunday night what days and hours they're working, because most people who do this part-time are serving other clients on other days. However, everyone in my staff is willing to shift. So say Tuesday is the regular day for the person, but on Friday you are having an amazing assembly, and it really has to be covered. Well, then you would just ask, for this week, can you come Thursday and Friday instead of Tuesday and Thursday? And in most cases, that's going to work out. Also, I have a team, so it's kind of like going to, a multi-doctor medical practice. If there's a gap, if you need something, I'm going to figure out a way to cover it for you.
But when we call, we don't have to wait like a half hour to get a nurse on the phone, right?
No, you don't.
And I just one other question. Social media, I think you explained. I mean, I imagine that's posting to Facebook, posting to Snap, whatever it is that we decide to use. The publicity, which seems to be the bulk of the, is that where the newsletters fall and the stories that may be written that may be sent to local papers? Like, what falls within?
Under publicity is generating content. It's everything the specialist does to tell your story. So writing stories that become press releases, that become posts on Facebook and Twitter, that making videos with a cell phone, putting together things like these Adobe Spark pages, creating a flyer for something that you want to publicize. Everything that falls under that. Writing a message home because something, you've had a mess with your transportation and you need to explain it to the parents. Helping you phrase that and write that. Creating e-newsletters that would come out on a kind of regular basis. All of that comes under publicity.
I guess it was last year, we were at the NISBA conference on social media, a few of us. And one of the things that was really intriguing was this notion of someone monitoring social media or being able to respond to like a myth or something that was not true. What role would the communications specialist play in that arena?
Well, we monitor your Facebook page. We've had a couple of things that I've brought to your attention over the last few years that needed attention. We could develop a protocol for monitoring the things we're excluded from. I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to be part of a closed Facebook. In most districts, what we do is that someone on staff who is in one of those groups gives us a heads up. We have somebody who keeps an eye on the closed groups and lets us know if there's a crazy rumor flying. And then you're not in the group and you wouldn't want to be in the group, but you respond by putting out accurate information on your own social media. You know, that's the most effective way to deal with that stuff.
And I assume that, so what would be the process if we were to approve this? I mean, I would assume you'd have to sit down to figure out exactly what it is we're looking to have you do. Do you have an idea, Valerie, of like who would be part of that discussion to figure out what would, best serve?
Sure, and I know the board has talked about wanting to have a board newsletter or some, regular form of platform for communication. I think that would be important. So perhaps, if we did have an initial, kind of committee, if you would, it would definitely entail the principals, most of the people around this table, because actually we did attempt to create a safety newsletter, or we did, a safety newsletter, child nutrition, GEMS done, technology and innovation. Kathy has a regular HR newsletter. What else? There was a mental health newsletter. So those kinds of things are very helpful because, as you say, Ellen, not everyone goes to the website and has the patience to go through. So I think the places that would typically provide the content would need to be at the table. So it would be the administrators, the directors, representation from this table to map out what kinds of things we're interested in providing in terms of newsletters. I think it would be important to capture, what's only available in the graduation program, which actually is chock full of really good information. For example, scholarship recipients and what colleges students go through and go to or accepted into, and other kinds of points of pride, that are only in that little pamphlet. And so if your child graduates that school year, you have it. No one else does. So I think that's a really great place to look at producing, maybe it's the start of the school year newsletter, the one that goes out via paper, so that it does in fact get into the hands of everyone, not just our parents whose children are in schools, but there are half of the community that doesn't have children in the school district anymore and are not going to our website or not getting any of our bareback communications.
We can work with community groups, VFW, Italian American Club, whatever groups are popular in this community, and give them the opportunity to have people sign up to receive our electronic communications. And we would do that. What I would recommend for next steps, if you did decide to go forward with the contract, I wouldn't wait for a committee to come up with all this. Let the person come in and do what they do, and then have the committee as soon as you're ready. And that person could even attend if you would like them to. They wouldn't have to. They could do it afterwards after you've made all your decisions. But I would get going right out of the gate. I mean, we came and did, opening photos for the district so that you wouldn't miss out on that, even though we didn't have a contract in place. So I wouldn't want you to lose any time in the fall. I want you to have the person right there getting stories from the get-go. And then we can talk about how to tailor it to really meet your needs. I mean, at the top of my mind, I'm thinking of communications around the strategic plan. I do think you want to find a way to let residents and parents know what that plan means in the classroom for the individual fifth grader, So that's something I think should be communicated. Otherwise, it's a no-brainer. You want to communicate all your success stories. Every time a student or a teacher is honored, that's a reflection of this district. And that's not fair. You want to do that. But you also want to capture the stories that won't be captured unless you have someone walking the halls. The special engaging lessons. There was mentioned earlier by Michelle about a math program. Well, that's the kind of thing we could delve into to try to make it concrete for people, because everyone's not an educator, doesn't have a doctorate in education, and might need it to be explained in a more concrete way. parents would understand.
What was the reimbursement rate again for the service?
About 40% is what our districts receive
So 40%
of the total.
reimbursement of the 57,000?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's been the average for a number of years running, so I don't expect it to change.
What was the answer to that? I'm sorry.
40%?
And we would get that at the end of this school year, so we wouldn't get discounted every time we get a bill.
No, you wouldn't, yeah, it would come to the end.
So, just real quick,
Yes, sure.
you said on these examples that you handed out, these reflect different time commitments in each of these districts. How many days a week is someone who gets on the rules job?
4. The Somers person is 3 days a week. The Crowley person is about 2.5 days a week. Yeah.
And you said that publicity on there sort of refers to kind of a catch-all for all
It's a
those
catch-all.
different things that they did. So we're getting one person 2 days a week.
Yeah. Plus someone to continue the social media service. So
Where would that
that's-
occur?
That's a remote service, so the person isn't here, but there's a form that teachers fill out if they have something going on that they want covered or posted to social media. And right now, it goes to Laura Belfiore on my staff. She edits it and then posts it. When we have someone here a couple of days a week, I think we'll be able to do even more with this information. Like, I don't think teachers tell us now when something's coming up. So if I have a really engaging lesson that I'm going to be doing, it would be great to put that form in the week before, and then the person who's going to be here on site would make sure they were there to cover it. So you would also have that, and that includes monitoring it. We do monitor your Facebook, as I said before to Dr. Henry Piedmont. There were a couple of instances where we caught something and took care of it.
Okay, so the 30 days of social media services are a separate line that you're not expecting the person who's inside the school the 2 days a week to be doing. That's over and above
Yes,
what the
right. And the
consultant-
person who's here will definitely be posting to social media,
Mhm.
but if we give them this job, then it's going to deduct from the amount of time they'll have to go in and out of classrooms and write those stories that I think will really benefit your district.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions?
I could go online and pull things up, I just didn't know we could on the agenda.
We last time, I think you went over some of
Right.
it, so thank
Um,
you.
Maybe I'll follow up with an email, you can click at your leisure if you want to see something. Okay? It'll help you with the committee if you decide to go forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to continue the conversation then, there are two other factors or people to consider or discuss. So Eric Rose, we've seen the contract, I have it, pulled it up, of what work he's been doing, and then also Mr. Stockfield presented a little while ago his proposal. And so just in determining our direction, I mean, looking at Mr. Gross's contract again, and, I know that Ms. Lane mentioned that another district uses both and they coordinate, so there is no overlap. And while, Eric's done great work, I was just kind of refreshing my memory before tonight's meeting, looking at the spotlight video that he does, and he really does get to all the classrooms, and it's great stuff. I mean, it's what we're doing in our schools. I just don't know if it's effective. That's one piece, and I don't know that the world's changing. I mean, it's just kind of social media is changing, and the way we utilize him needs to be amended. And I don't know if he's capable of doing a lot of things outlined through this other option, the BOCES. So the question then becomes, how does Eric fit into the picture as a first question, then we move on to Mr. Stockfield, but where do we see Eric in this whole picture? The contract right now, as I read it, it seems to me that it's these things as needed. But if we were to amend our need for him, our use of him, we would have to reach out to him to amend the contract, I would think. It doesn't require us to use his services, but it might make sense if we were going to amend it somehow or do away with it, I don't know, then you would need to reach out to him and have that conversation, but what are your thoughts?
Does anybody have any concept as to like the spotlight on Brewster, like what is the like rate on that, or, you know? how
I
many
looked at it,
views?
I mean, I've seen it, it's, you know, some will be between 50 and 150, sometimes up to 200, it depends.
I guess it
But
depends
you have to
on the
physically
spotlight,
go-
what you're spotlighting too, probably.
Or if, I guess, yeah, right?
And I think people can zero in on the stories or the segments that they want to focus on, and that, you know, that's also part of the analytical feedback, is that you can see, you know, the amount of time that someone spends on a particular version of Spotlight. They certainly are, I mean, he spends a lot of time pulling the information together, but again, should we consider, maybe there are some things that do need a longer video, and, you know, maybe it's a construction-related project, you know, where those things were very helpful because they did kind of tell the story, or something else that could be happening. But then, you know, maybe the 4 or 5 minute or so videos of children doing something or someone doing something, you know, would be equivalent to the amount of time that people do spend watching videos. Then there are also, the possibility of stories that we would want him to come out and capture. I mean, he did a beautiful story about Harper, you know, the therapy dog that's going to be at CV Star. And that, you know, that's I mean, people like those kinds of stories. Who doesn't love a dog? Right? Especially a lab.
Yeah, but I think he actually does great stories, and there could be a use for him, but then the question becomes pushing that information out. You know, you have to physically go to YouTube or a link or whatever and find the thing, and you may not know which one it is. So it seems like we need to streamline the information, the 4-minute video or the clip or whatever it is, and get it out to the different areas.
And I think, go ahead.
Because what I was gonna say is just 2 thoughts on this. Was number 1, like Amanda over at Somers, she does produce and host the Spotlight video. And being that Eric works alongside one of Ellen's people over in Mayapack, I don't see why, you know, we can't have basically this communication specialist directing what types of things that they want Eric to be on.
Well, is it the case, I think it was said that it was, but is it the case that, so, you know, looking at Eric's prior bills or invoices or whatever, you know, if he's doing a spotlight on someone, has he been asked to do that spotlight on that person?
Yes, we find those, we identify the content, or he hears about it from a building administrator or a teacher or, you know, dean.
So he's doing work when it's brought to his attention or he's asked to do work. So it seems as if, I mean, what we constantly are talking about is better communication and easier methods of finding the communication, which I think is probably better done under something like BOCES is proposing. But it seems like they could work if there was something that we definitely want to have in the Courier for some reason, or we want to have a longer spotlight video for some reason, they could work in conjunction, but I don't know that both of them need to be going at the same time. You know, it seems to me that Eric's purpose may be in a more narrow,
Specific.
a more specific and narrow.
Well, the contract kind of calls for as needed, so that's kind of where I'm thinking the communication specialist could kind of guide that as when he's needed.
Right.
It sounds like the services complement each other, and I mean, my thought would be to continue with Eric Gross, because he might have a target audience that the community doesn't tap in, they won't tap into the website or Twitter. So him doing the hard copies and him doing Spotlight, I mean, maybe that's one way for him to get an audience that we normally wouldn't reach. My concern right now is that we're really discussing the nitty-gritty, and I'm just worried that we're getting into the weeds on some of this. I think my recommendation would be to decide, are we going with both, and then kind of figure out how they gel, or just one or the other.
Well, I think that if this was a discussion we were having earlier, then we'd be deciding how we want to do this. But the fact is, we already have a contract with Mr. Rose. So that's already standing. And I don't know what his contract looks like with Mayapack. I assume it's probably similar to this. But there's a lot of, Mr. Rose will, and such things will be made available to him. My concern, I think that BOCES seems to cast a wider net and probably will have a greater reach, which, again, we've talked about the idea of getting the word out to as many people as possible, and all these different mediums to do that is great. My concern is the redundancy factor of it. We've already got a contract here, now we're adding something on. I don't know that it's a guarantee. I mean, last year, the invoice was for a total of $2,500. So, we're not talking about huge numbers?
It was 14,000.
Oh,
What did you have to
Yeah,
add?
this is- I'm
scroll
sorry.
down.
Oh,
You have
okay.
to add them all up.
So we are talking about bigger numbers. So, I mean, that's not, to say, well, we're gonna spend 14 here, and then we're gonna spend an extra 54 here. I like what BOCES is putting out there, but we already have one signed contract. And so to just tack on another one with the hope that we can get them to sort of work in concert because they've done it someplace else under terms that we're not familiar with, that's
But the
What is this
contract with
then?
Mr. Gross is not for a set dollar amount.
We don't need to.
Right.
As
needed.
So we're confident that even though the contract says things like Mr. Rose will, and he will be provided with this and with that, we could turn around and basically say to him, we're not doing any of those things, we're not providing you with those things, and we're not in violation of the contract.
No, and he's comfortable with that.
And the contract could be amended to be more specific to that, so that there would be no, question.
I mean, he's been in the district for many years. He's the person who told me about Oscar. And I know that there were conversations the night before, rumors the night before, and he's the only person who sent me an email and said, Valerie, do you know this is happening? He has a reach and access in the community. And I think the years that he's been involved doing what he's been doing, according to how we described what we wanted, he's done those things. And he's done those things well. I think we have to look at, why would we give up, someone who really, in essence, has helped to promote us, for, as I said, in the way that we described it. I think we should look at what he's doing. There's no dollar amount other than the hourly rate here, $105 an hour, and that we talk to him along with the communication specialist from BOCES to determine what exactly it is that, he could do. What's his specialty that would also complement and support the district? I mean, we want to, I don't think we want to give up someone like Eric.
Well, I think one thing that he probably
That
does,
Eric, not the other.
which Kristen brought up, is, which we talk about too, wanting to reach people who don't have kids in the district but are taxpayers
And half of the system.
And that, I do think, is where, the local newspapers do play a role. And that would probably that's not something that's going to be tackled by a Facebook page or there is likely, I think there is that benefit, because that is a segment of the population that we want to try to reach in a better way.
And I would add, again, we can work with the contract, it's open enough that we can, I know Valerie said she's spoken to him already, we can work with the contract, and it's not mandated that this happens. And honestly, the use I potentially see, maybe if we need him, will be on those days, perhaps, I know she said she has a team, but if we use BOCES, he is right here and he could be called for some sort of on those off days. And that to me would be, you know, a resource in him, and we don't have to utilize it, you know, the way it's outlined now, but we could on those off days. I do want to just ask, before we kind of make a decision in that direction, to just briefly discuss the presentation that Mr. Stockfield presented, and what our thoughts were on that presentation as well. So he lives in the community. He did a detailed presentation on a communications, you know, person in the district as well. He presented a full-time position, which was a full-time salary, and there were other things he presented in that presentation. You know, obviously BOCES is, you know, not a different cost, and that's a consideration, of course. And it is our first time doing this intensively, and, you know, I feel like we're not exactly sure what direction we're going with things, as far as how we want to utilize this tool. And, you know, so I personally want to be more cautious in our expense on this right now, and as we go through this year and figure out, and I know in my calls to other districts, districts just happen to come up, I didn't even ask, but some of their websites are great and the communication's great, and I was like, oh, how did you guys arrive to this? And they happen to be using BOCES, and were just night and day in where the district was and communication with the community was, and so they're effective. I mean, I can speak to that from what other districts have said, and I'm just concerned that we may need to just tread cautiously at first, but those are my thoughts.
I agree. We do need to tread cautiously. We do have to watch our money, because it is the taxpayers' money. But we also need to highlight our students in the most effective way. You know, based on what I've heard, you know, from other districts as well, BOCES has helped them, and it's a start. It's a starting place for us. That could be revamped later on. It is 40% reimbursable, and that's a huge, huge consideration.
Anyone else? Thoughts? No? So then we're back to the discussion of Mr. Gross and BOCES. So if I may make a suggestion that, you know, in my opinion, that we should go ahead with BOCES and just look at Eric's contract and speak to him on amending it. And I don't think he would be opposed to that, I don't know. And even if he was, again, even though it says that, you know, it outlines what he will do, but also the language allows it, you know, to be at our discretion.
Do we need to vote on BOCES? Is that
Well,
something that we have to vote on?
No, we don't have a contract, so we would need to kind of make a decision to let whoever know what we're doing and just kind of get a decision as to the direction so we can inform people, and then we would vote on the contract and all that.
Okay.
Because it's not on our agenda.
Okay.
We don't even have the language for that, right?
Okay.
We just have Eric's right now, so we would need to speak to him further on amending it, and how we would utilize him, and then get a contract from BOCES and put that on an agenda.
Okay.
What kind of timeline, I mean, I know you were waiting, you either hired someone for us or you're hiring
Right.
someone for us.
I have someone waiting in abeyance that I have picked out for you. This is what BOCES uses. My department, we have it's the contract addendum, and
That's the one we have.
so it's, you know, Valerie signs or her designate after you make a decision.
You want to make a decision? It's your call.
I mean, we could, I don't know, can we give direction to and then have a contract on the next agenda? Because, or can we would have to amend the agenda for an action item?
Well, my only concern is I think we've already
So
lost
you
two
want-
people.
Yeah, we have, and I do have someone who literally has another job offer, but she would rather do this for her own reasons, and I'm really hoping to keep her. I'm not making this up.
Can we
And we
amend?
make a motion
We
to
can.
add the,
action items?
under action items.
We can, and then we can go at that point and decide,
Yeah.
okay, so when we get to that, you can make that amendment since we have
Okay.
a copy of it. I think it's actually in
It is
our
here.
board docs, yeah,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we'll go forward with that. So are we good on this item? So, thank you. We move on to Deputy Matthew Kreisky, bear safety presentation, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Matt.
Back in March or April, I was tasked with looking at the lockdown procedure here in Brewster to determine, A, is it effective? And B, is there something we can do to make it more effective? So, to do this, I spoke with a bunch of the other SROs, some of our active shooter instructors. I went back on some of my own training, and I looked at what exactly I was asked to do. And anyone who has ever got an email from me has seen this. Every day, millions of parents hug millions of kids, their most precious possession, the most precious thing on the face of the earth. And they send those kids to school, trusting us to keep them alive. This is the most important thing any society can do, protect our young. And that's when I realized that our ultimate goal is to protect our young. So no matter what I come up with, it's never enough until we can say with 100% certainty there will never be a casualty. The emergency response procedure set forth by New York State is a 5-part system, and it's based on a specific situation that happens within a district. So for example, in a shelter in place, we will enter that specific procedure when there's an event that's taking place, and it's typical an environmental event or a weather event, where we're trying to keep the students and faculty and staff safe from an event that's happening outside. We'll stay inside the building, close the windows, keep everybody in the classrooms, we can continue teaching, but we can, for all intents and purposes, keep going on with our day. In a hold in place, that's more of a temporary procedure where we may have an ill student who needs to get transported to the hospital. We'll hold all building activity, make sure everybody's in a room, so EMS staff can get in and out quickly, offering expediency for them and some level of privacy for the ill student. Evacuate, you got a fire, chemical spill, something like that. That one's pretty self-explanatory. A lockout is where there's an issue that's taking place outside the building. There's no threat inside. There may be something outside the building that could potentially cause a problem. So what we then do is we make sure that we have staff members at every exit. We have monitors checking the doors regularly to make sure that they're secured. No unauthorized people are allowed in the building. Appointments are canceled. We make sure that nobody who doesn't need to be there isn't there. And then there's a lockdown. Now, this is the one that keeps people like me up at night. Not because I don't think that our faculty and staff and students know what they're doing. I've been in a lot of districts, and I got to tell you, Brewster, they got it. They got it down. They know exactly what to do. I've been in every school in the district. I've done lockdown drills in this district for 3 years. The faculty know what they're doing. The kids know what they're doing. It is absolutely phenomenal to see. In this situation, though, this is the most dangerous, because if you're going into a lockdown in a school, that means there's an active threat inside that building that's looking to do harm. This is where we have to look at what we do. So Valerie came up to me and said, "Hey Matt, I want you to come up with something that's going to be more than what we normally do." Because I'll tell you, what we normally do is we lock the door
And hide.
and we hide and we wait like sheep for the wolf. That's not acceptable. Not anymore. It used to be, because that's all we knew. Unfortunately, every time there's an event where an active killer enters a school or a church or a shopping center, we in law enforcement learn something. We pick something up from that. So I came up with an acronym, and basically what BEARS is it's an acronym for actions that can be taken during a lockdown, only during a lockdown now, okay, to increase survivability should an active threat present itself. Because again, up until now, we've been training everybody just to lock the door and hide. Lockdown isn't enough. We all know that. I've been to trainings. My supervisor and I were fortunate enough to go to an active shooter instructor school back in February, and the instructor gave us all kinds of great tools to use. Some of them I've encompassed into BEARS. So let's talk about BEARS. What is it? Breaks down like this: barricade, evacuate, advise, react, and silence. 5 different things that can be done. They don't have to be done all together. This is not designed to be a step-by-step method either. Please understand that. These are 5 different things that we want to teach our faculty, staff, and students about what else they can do to help themselves. Now, Brewster's a very fortunate district. You've got 3 SROs and an NSPO on one campus. The location of the campus is such that you have the Sheriff's Department 3 miles away, State Trooper Barracks 2 miles away, Village of Brewster Police 2 miles away, Town of Kent Police 4 miles away. See where I'm going with this? So we have that benefit. But the one benefit we never have is time. These action items are designed to help give us time. Time to protect our young. If you're forced to remain inside a building during an active threat, locking a door isn't going to be enough. Now, in most cases, if an armed assailant tries to get into a door, they're probably not going to try to get in any further. That is not a chance we should be willing to take. One of the techniques in barricading is, regardless of the type of room you're in, you should figure out a way to block that door. Obviously, we want to lock it first, but we need to figure out other ways of what we can do. Put tables, chairs, filing cabinets, desks, whatever you can find. Put a door chuck under it. Something you can do to barricade that door. Now, in Brewster, we have 2 different types of doors, inward opening and outward opening. It depends on how old the classroom happens to be. They changed the code several years ago. So there are ways to barricade for both. These are easy techniques. We can train just about anybody to barricade a door in less than 60 seconds. Very simply, it can just be piling a bunch of tables and chairs to help prevent an armed intruder from getting in. We've got to use our students to our advantage. Now, obviously, I'm not saying students in the sense of kindergartners, first graders. I work in a high school. So for me, I'm expecting help. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to expect the students to step in. We ask them every day, if you see something, say something. You are responsible for your own safety, just like me, just like the principals, just like your teachers. What we're asking them to do is help increase the survivability of themselves, their peers, their teachers. We're coming. Calvary's coming. I can absolutely guarantee you that. We will be there, without a doubt. Barricading is only going to help increase the time for me to do what I have to do. I just want to show you a quick 2-minute video. This is the best video I've seen. It literally is only 2 minutes long. That shows you the benefits of students barricading during a lockdown.
Terrified students barricade themselves inside classrooms at UCLA as a crazed gunman stalks the campus. But there's a problem.
Our doors open outward, so it was very hard to try to lock it because it didn't have a lock.
It's a flaw that could have proved tragic. Some UCLA students improvised, using anything they could find to barricade themselves inside. Chairs, tables, printers, even a foosball table.
What is that? Did something fall?
These frightened students tried to barricade themselves inside a library. You can see one guy trying to wrap his belt around the door hinge to no avail.
Okay, you're in an active shooter situation. You hear the shots go off.
Safety expert Bill Stanton showed me simple ways to bar a door.
A screwdriver. This class happens to have one. So I'm going to put it in, I'm going to wedge it, and I'm going to step away from the door because you don't want to be in the way of the door.
Now we have a producer on the other side. Try to open the door. And she can't get in at all. And a folding chair can be used to bar a door too.
Set it. Step away.
Stanton also demonstrated how to build a strong barricade when unthinkable happens, as it did at UCLA.
We want to get as much there. Let's go. Chairs. Keep on moving. It's never enough. Come on. More stuff.
We're learning more about the killer seen in this chilling image, identified as 38-year-old Minek Sarkar. Police say they found a kill list at Sarkar's home. On the list, his victims, UCLA professor William Klug and Sarkar's girlfriend, Ashley Hasty, found slain in Minnesota. Fortunately, students who manned the barricades at UCLA were safe.
I'm very proud of all of them. They went proactive. They looked for anything and everything to secure those doors.
Can we go?
So, he showed us 2 or 3 different ways to barricade a door in less than 30 seconds. I'm fairly confident that just watching the video, most of us in this room now can barricade an outward opening door with environmentally available stuff. That's the good thing. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what we, as the SROs, when we were talking about it, tried to think about what we could do. We live in New York State. The fire codes in New York State, unfortunately, do not lend itself to help us with respect to devices that are commercially available to prevent entry. There are several devices here on the market. I've absolutely researched every single one of them. There are some that I've even recommended, and I've been shot down every single time when they go before New York State. New York State mandates that regardless of the situation, a door must be able to be opened with one motion. Every single one of the devices that are on the market today, every single one of them, require more than one motion. Therefore, they do not conform to New York State fire codes. As much as we'd like to change the codes, that's not the case. And we can't just sit around and wait for that to happen. So we have to get creative. One way is remembering a key phrase, environmentally available. If it's in the room, we can use it. Makes sense, right? That's why we saw in the video them using tables, chairs, anything they have. How many classrooms do you know have one of these in them? Most of them, right? You know they violate New York State Fire Code? Victor's shaking his head. Matt, why do you see this? Different things that we can do. Now, what we need to do to make this more effective is we need to visit the classrooms. We need to see what is environmentally available in our classrooms. We may need to move some desks around. We may need to adjust the layout of the furniture in the room. Put a filing cabinet closer to the door. Maybe we need to move the teacher's desk closer to the door. Maybe we need to put a screwdriver in the teacher's desk. Something like that. That make it now environmentally available. These are some barricading options. Again, this is not the be-all, end-all. These are merely suggestions that easy things that we can do, very low cost. You like that, right? To help keep everybody safe. Here's something that we don't talk about during a lockdown. I don't know why. Evacuate. If you know the threat is in another part of the building, why are you locking down? Why are we staying? Why are we telling our people, lock the door and hide? Get out of the building. If you reasonably believe it is safe to evacuate, leave. Go. Somewhere else other than in the building. We know there's a threat here. We need to get somewhere where their threat is not. Especially if you're already outside the classroom. Gym, recess, your environmental science class. Classrooms that have exterior doors, perfect. In the high school, the chorus room and the band room both have exterior doors. Unless the active threat is in the music wing, there's absolutely no reason why those two rooms need to remain in the building. Kindergarten too, a lot of them have exterior doors. Get them out. That's easy. What we need to do as a district is determine where are we going to go. We got to designate some rally points. So the faculty and staff that take charge of these students know where they're going when they evacuate the building. I like the turf field. It's big, holds a lot of people. More importantly, there are cameras on the turf field that can be accessed by a lot of people, first responders included. There are emergency phones along the field. So if anybody has information to contact 911 with, they can, to help law enforcement in EMS response. It's a central location that's accessible by roads. We've got a big campus. We've got a lot of different places available. This is something that would go before the district safety committee. We would then present it to them, and then building by building, we would determine what are the best locations for our schools to evacuate, depending on where in the building they're evacuating from. Advised. We've been trained that when we go into a lockdown, we're not allowed to do anything. Turn off your phone, put your head between your knees and pray. Not the case. If you have information that can help, get that information out. There are ways to do it silently. If you see something, say something. I had the privilege of speaking to every class in the high school yesterday, and that was the first thing I said. And most of the time they get sick of hearing me because all I talk about is safety. And they know that that's my jam. That's what I do. My job is to keep them safe. But I need them to help me. I've got 1,100 students in the high school, another 150 faculty and staff, and one of me. All the help I can get is going to be huge because, I don't like those odds. So we need to start helping each other. So advise, tell somebody. This is big even before the situation. We've been really pressing that here in the district. We've got the anonymous alert system put in, which has been great. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from that. We've got a lot of good tips on that have helped. But even during a lockdown situation, there's information that you can get out, get it out. React. This is the scary one. This is the scary one because this is what you do if you're confronted with an armed threat. This is the worst case. This is what keeps me awake at night. This life. Because we don't train for this. We don't train for what happens. Because we're locking doors and hoping that they don't come in. What can we do if we're confronted with an armed threat? I learned something at that active shooter instructor school in February, and it took me a while to comprehend it. The human mind is physically incapable of doing two things at the same time. So, first of all, my mother's been lying to me all the time. But it made me think. The human brain is physically incapable of doing two things at the same time. Armed intruder comes into the room and I distract him or her. Are they going to be able to accurately be a threat to me? No. Then I saw a newspaper article of a school in Pennsylvania that's taking 5-gallon pails and putting rocks in them and leaving them in each classroom. In the event that an armed intruder makes way into the classroom, these rocks are designed to distract. They're not designed to take the shooter down. You can distract the shooter and get away and evacuate, There's that word again. Now, you're no longer confronted with that threat. Other tactics I've seen, rushing the assailant. Again, you overload sensory, they're not going to be able to respond. I watched a SWAT team commander, a trained operator, not able to get off one shot with a Nerf gun during a training simulation when he was rushed by 4 people. I like those odds. I like that. That tells me that we have hope. Defend. New York State subscribes to the Department of Homeland Security's run, hide, fight during an active shooter. Last possible thing we should be talking about is defending ourselves. However, it is something that we do need to talk about. In that situation, we need to tell our faculty, our staff, our students, it's okay. It's your life. It's your best friend's life. In this situation, yeah, I think it's something that we at least need to address with our students, with our faculty. The last action item on bears is silence. Silence your cell phones. Currently, in the emergency protocol set forth by New York State, they tell you to have everybody turn off their cell phones. First of all, I think it's unreasonable to ask somebody to do that, especially in a situation like this. More importantly, I wouldn't want somebody to do that. And now I'm cutting off a viable means of communication. Whether or not the phone's going to work in a situation like this, that's not for me to say. But if I have the option, the opportunity to try, if I know something that can help somebody else, I'm going to say it. So, just by silencing your phone, I can still use it to communicate quietly, without a sound. It buys, right? We just talked about that. It's one of our action items. Because I assure you, the first thing that's going to happen when a school is in a lockdown, phones are coming out, people are texting mom. We see it time and time again. What if those texts to mom are, oh my God, Mom, there's somebody in the school. They're on the 2nd floor in the science room. Well, now Mom can call 911 and say, my daughter's at Brewster High School. She just said that there are shots coming from the 2nd floor of the science room. Wow. That's a lot of information that law enforcement outside may not have yet. That's information that some of Marissa Rose may not even have yet. That they can get to us relatively quickly to help us get to the threat quickly. School safety is something that we all have to take responsibility for. It's not just the SRO. It's not just the building principal. It's not just the safety committee's job. It's everybody. It's all of us. It's our job to do that. So I put this slide in because it gets a lot of press. You're hearing a lot about it. Well, I'm just going to have teachers carry guns. That'll fix the problem, right? I need to stress. The Sheriff's Department and the district do not feel that this is an effective strategy. Faculty and staff's job, their responsibility are to the students. Their job is not to engage a threat. That's our job. Leave it to us. There are too many bad things that can happen with this. So we don't feel this is an effective strategy. We don't even want to visit it as a possible option. As far as rolling this out, this is something that's going to take a lot of bit of planning, a lot of time with building administrators, district level administrators, SROs. We need to develop a plan for instruction for our faculty and staff. We talked about doing it on the superintendent's conference day, where we don't have any students in the building, so we can take time and make sure that everybody understands the practices that we're talking about. Then we need to talk about student instruction. What are the best ways for us to roll this out? We're dealing with kids from 4 to 21. We've got to figure out an effective way to train all of them. large group instruction, small group instruction, individual classrooms. You know, as SROs, we're fortunate enough that we get to go into classrooms. Deputy Super gets to see every single kid in JFK more than once over the course of the year. That's a fantastic opportunity for him to start talking to our young ones about how they can start keeping themselves safe. Deputy Simone teaches a 6th grade class every day. Safety matters. Excellent opportunity for him to reinforce stuff like this. We can do large group instruction with some of our older kids who don't necessarily need the one-on-one. Not to say we won't have a one-on-one, but that's for us to determine at the building level. The last thing we need to do is we need to create some sort of parent resources. Because as parents, we talk to our kids about fire drills all the time, right? I'm sure many of you have evacuation plans for your own home that you've gone over with your kids. There's no reason we shouldn't be talking to our kids about what to do during a lockdown. Because I can assure you, you're more likely to encounter an armed threat outside of a school than inside of a school. 54% of all armed threats happen in some area of commerce. So that's something that can be helpful to them outside. Going forward, at the next district safety meeting, this presentation is going to go before the district safety team for their consideration and their input. Now, this is in its infancy. This is just, Matt's thoughts compounded with stuff that's come up from other members of law enforcement, other members of faculty and staff here at Brewster, some of my colleagues. If you have something, call us. Let us know. This is as much something that you guys need input in as we do. We have a duty to keep ourselves safe. We have a duty to keep our kids safe. We have to do that together. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm sorry he wasn't that enthusiastic.
Great job.
So, Matt?
Yeah.
So you're talking about implementing this K through 12?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, obviously with the younger grades, it's going to be more based on the faculty and staff taking control. As the kids get older, we'll be able to start using them in different areas, specifically with barricading. That's really the big area when we're forced to stay. But I think we need to look at areas, what can we do to help get out? Because it's something we don't talk about and we really should.
I think the analogy to the fire drill really hit it with me, because we don't tell our kids to sit in the corner and wait for the firemen to get there. They take affirmative steps to defend their lives, and they can do it. And they're taught to do that, and they can be taught to do other things.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I'd like to move up one of our presentations, number 5, construction update. So we can have our guys here for that. I can just move that through. Yeah. So I can ask them to come up, please.
Thank you. I'm Joe Riley from KG&B Architects. I may have used it before. This is John Watson from Insight Engineers, civil engineers for the project, and we're here to talk about the work that is happening in the parking lot at JFK High School and on the fields, the softball fields and the baseball field. Those of you, I would believe everybody here is aware that the parking lot and the bus drop-off got paved and striped, and new sidewalks are in place for the opening of school at JFK. There is work ongoing on the side parking lot. It is behind schedule. It is moving along. A lot of that asphalt actually came out this afternoon, the old asphalt. The intention there is that The bottom stronger base course layer of asphalt will go in next Monday or Tuesday so that that area can be used for parking and to have access to that public side of the building where the cafeteria and gymnasium, and there's a lot of public interface along that edge of the building. Work will continue in the rear area of that parking lot, closer to the athletic field, because we have a different paving structure there and we have a lot of drainage structures. But by getting the heavy-duty asphalt in place, we will have a safe area for parking, and it will stand up to the traffic of the heavy construction going on. The top coat of the asphalt will not go on until all of the heavy work is done in the back. You may have noticed that from the driveway entry to the side parking lot, there is no top coat of asphalt yet. And that is for the same reason. We don't want to put that in and then drive dump trucks over it for 2 weeks. So that is the sequence of work that is happening there. Work is underway on the softball field. They are screening topsoil now. Drainage structures are going in, starting going in tomorrow. They expect to have seed on that field within the next 2 weeks. They are behind schedule. We had a hard time getting them out there and getting mobilized. And we have had a lot of delays associated with permitting from DEP, which John will talk about. We are through that process. We are through getting the initial permit from them, but the process continues. I'll let John talk about that for a minute.
Sure, thanks, Joe. For those of you who weren't here last year on the board, I was here before the board in January or February, and that's when we were authorized to go ahead with the JFK paving and ball field emergency work. At that time, I let the board know that typically this is a 9 to 12 month design and approval process for the DEP, and we were charged with getting that done in 5 months so the work could be done over summer. So we worked diligently with the DEP, and they were very cooperative from a timing standpoint as far as reviewing our applications, but as far as the technical details of what they required, they were as they typically were on every other project. So we did get help on the timeline, but not on the quantity and level of detail that they took on this project. That being said, there's some additional stormwater projects that came out of this work. What happened was when the phase 1 work was designed and built, CV Star and JFK, 2 years ago, there was stormwater systems that were designed in accordance with the state DEC regulations. At that time, we stayed under thresholds that would require us to go to the DEP, and so we just dealt with whatever requirements we had to comply with at that time. With this project this year, when the ball fields were lumped into the JFK paving project, that exceeded a threshold, which now required us to go to the DEP for a stormwater approval. When the DEP looked at the project, they came to us and said, well, your phase 1 work that you just did is really part of a common plan of development, and we're going to retroactively also look at the stormwater you did back then and make you get our department's approval for that work. And the way the department works is there's several different layers of stormwater regulations in New York State. New York State DEC is the top of the chain. Every project that exceeds certain thresholds in New York State has to get approval from the DEC, which we did for your phase 1 work. The DEP has their own regulations that are a little stricter and more stringent than the state's regulations. So when we had to go back to retroactive phase 1 work, they required additional stormwater treatment over and above what was already installed, designed, and approved as part of the phase 1 work. In addition, the phase 2 work, which we had designed previously, also they looked at that and required additional work for the phase 2 work. And the ball fields were a brand new project. They looked at that as they would any other project. So what I'd like to do is walk you through that additional work that wasn't in the original bid documents, contract documents, that you are responsible for as part of this project. The good news, as Joe mentioned, we did get the DEP approval for both the ball fields in June and then the JFK parking in August. So we have all of the approvals. What was difficult for us was that we did get a special exemption from the DEP to allow us to start construction of the JFK paving project prior to having approval. Very, very rare that this ever happens. They were very understanding and considerate that the work had to be done in the summer so that you could open school in the fall. You can't rebuild a parking lot for your active school during the school session. So they did allow us to do that. The problem was the timeline of the project was such that we were designing things and getting it reviewed as it was being built. So what we tried, and I was in constant contact with Victor and Andy, and the contractors for DEP kept coming back with comments, and we're trying to revise the plans, get the contractor revised plans. We were literally day to day giving him revised sketches throughout every step of his work this whole summer, feeding him new information that we thought the DEP was going to require or that they did require. And the great news is we were able to keep one step ahead of them the whole time. We didn't have to go and redo or rip out anything that was done. So that was one of our big goals, was to not have to rip out and redo anything, and we were able to do that. That being said, as I mentioned before, there's some additional stormwater stuff that's required. And this is phase 1 retro work. So this is the back of CD Star. This was the addition that was built. There's a sidewalk that comes in and around over here. Oh, sorry. So what DEP does is they also look at the stormwater regulations different than the state DEC. The state DEC takes a big picture look at a project and looks at the net impacts, the net increase in impervious surfaces, basically as a project as a whole. The DEP looks at every single square foot of area that we're disturbing. So what we did here was, for the main addition, we put a stormwater infiltration system over here. So there's a big underground containment infiltration system up on the north side of the addition. It's built, installed. What we didn't do was we oversized it a little bit, but we didn't grab this little sidewalk here and treat it. DEP came back and said, well, that's a new impervious surface. We don't look at it like the state does. You have to capture and treat that little sidewalk. So we had several options. Our by far most cost-effective, least expensive option was to plant trees. Tree planting is an accepted stormwater treatment method. The problem is, if you have a large addition, you don't have enough space to plant all of those trees. They have to be a certain size tree within a certain distance of the improvement. So what we were able to do on this retrofit was to plant 4 trees alongside the sidewalk, and that counted as the additional stormwater treatment. At the end of the day, much cheaper to plant 4 trees than install swales, catch basins, and more underground systems. So we're talking, a couple of thousand versus $10,000 to $15,000 for this one little area. This is the side of JFK. To give you a little perspective, the front bus loop is here. This is the side parking lot. The softball fields are over here. When we did our stormwater for this area for the DEC, we grabbed the main parking areas and put them in underground infiltration systems, just like we did at CV Star. The problem is, there were these 3 little sidewalks that we added to the doors here. So because it is technically, based on their interpretation of the regulations, a new impervious surface, because there wasn't a concrete sidewalk there before, we have to capture and treat those 3 sidewalks. What we were able to do there, based on our calculations, is plant 1, 2, 3, 4 trees in this area. That takes care of that additional stormwater treatment. I know it sounds petty and you're smiling at me, but that's the way the world works. Those are the smaller areas. The bigger ones are, and this is where it gets frustrating. This is the front bus loop. What this shows is the 2 new entrances. The old entrance was right about here. What we've done is shift the entrances out further. We've opened up the bus drop-off in front of the school so that the buses have more room to park and stack, and we've added more parking spaces to the car parking lot in the back. What we did, this light shade right through here, that's the old grass island. in the parking lot. So what we've done is we've removed that, and we've installed a new island right here. So you would think you can just switch off the areas, it's a net zero increase, and you don't have to do anything. What we did do is this dark shaded area is all new pavement where there was grass. So we have another stormwater infiltration system right next to the tennis court parking lot to deal with this. The problem is, DEP now says we have to capture and treat this because it's a new impervious surface, because it was grass, now it's pavement, this area right here. There's no way to get this water over there because it drains out to the front here. For us to put in a new stormwater system for this area, even though it's a very small area, would cost tens of thousands of dollars. So what we were able to do is use the tree planting once again. So we're going to have a row of trees down the center of this island. Let me reiterate that the DEP made us, even though we're taking out a grass island and just shifting it over 10 to 15 feet, we have to provide stormwater treatment for that. They don't look at the net zero, no, because the way we did it, there's no real increase to the runoff off the property. But
a significant point to make, and I don't know, we have to get into every single detail of the
Right.
treatment. A significant point to make is the time that this added to the process. Site work happens efficiently when they can come in with a crew and a group of machines and attack and move quickly through each phase of their construction in mass operations. And we have had our contractor bouncing from here to there in response to these design issues that still keep dripping through DEP, despite Insight's significant efforts. And that is a large part of the reason that we are not paved on the side of the school right now. And it is a large reason we are prescribed from opening up the work at the baseball field until we close more of the work that we already have underway. So people wondering, why the heck haven't you started the baseball field yet? And it's a perfectly reasonable thing for people to wonder. It is because we are not allowed to. And we actually pushed the limits on what we were allowed to do in front of the school because we couldn't wait. We have a responsibility to you, we have a responsibility to that school, and we all have a responsibility to those kids. So we actually went beyond what DEP said we could do in that area. And they sent us angry letters, and we dealt with angry letters. And we kept the work moving, and we got them calmed down. But we're still dealing with them in terms of the staging of the work and the timing of the work. And it's an issue because nature is what nature is, and it doesn't care about the DEP. So we are continuing to work. We are going to continue to talk to DEP about starting to work on the ball field now. We believe that we can. Insight actually contacted them today to give them new calculations to show that we have now closed up open areas so that we can open part of the baseball field, which will help us because if we can open part of it, we can start stockpiling material over there so that when we have permission to open all of it, we can make it happen quickly. So the message that I want to get through is there's a whole lot of effort going on, and a lot of it's not apparent. And I understand that there probably are frustrated people who are seeing this process and wondering, well, what the heck is going on? They should be planting grass right now. And that's a valid opinion. It has not been for a lack of effort. Effort is intensifying, and we're continuing to move along. We expect, as I said, to have hard surface on most of the side parking lot when kids come back next Wednesday. And probably the following week, most of the work will be done with that parking lot. There'll still be some restoration, grass seed and stuff happening around there. The work at the fields will continue. And we're looking now that the seed will go down on the softball fields 2 weeks from now, maybe a little bit less than 2 weeks from now. If we can get the permissions that we need to get, it's probably going to be another week to 10 days after that that we can get topsoil and seed down on the baseball field. So we are continuing to push. continuing to try and find ways to move stuff forward, and it is, at this point, dealing with DEP and, you know, pushing the envelope as hard as we can.
Thanks, Joe. Good point. Back to this, just keep in mind, these are additional requirements over and above what was already designed into the project. We have significant stormwater treatment areas for all parts of the project. These are just the extra ones, and Victor wanted me to give a presentation on just the additional work that the DEP is required. So there's quite a bit of stormwater infrastructure that I'm not talking about that's been part of it. That was the bulk of their review. This is sort of the tail wagging the dog. But this is the stuff that's additional cost to you, and we wanted to give you guys a clear direction of what this was. This was another area. This was the backside of JFK. This was the addition that was put in. This is the walkway back to the turf field. There's an existing underground infiltration system here. Based on the DEP requirements, we have to expand that a little bit. There was, based on the volume of water we had to deal with, we couldn't add just a couple trees. It would have been 100 or 150 trees. So we ended up this is an underground infiltration system. What we've done is we've been able to, we're going to be installing this actually this coming weekend. So it's going to be done over the holiday weekend so that it's not impacting the students. This will be done by Tuesday morning. So this one's already in the works. This one is on track. It's buried. It's going to have grass over top, so you're not even going to know it's there, but it's, once again, additional DEP requirement for this work. This one is, we spent a lot of time with DEP back and forth with different options here. This is the turf field, this is the back of JFK, this is the new concession stand that was just built. Based on their review of the project, they wanted additional treatment for the concession stand. There's a little small stormwater pond, it's just a little grass depression over here. What we tried to do is find a way to retrofit that pond, which is already a hole in the ground, and use that as some type of stormwater treatment. We went through many iterations back and forth with them. It ended up being a pretty major reconstruction of that pond, over excavation, bringing in special soil material, a lot of plant material. It's probably in the $30,000 range to retrofit that, just that one pond for this concession stand. What we came up with and had conversations with Andy and some facilities guys, one of the acceptable stormwater options is to install a rain barrel or a cistern, and it's basically a stormwater holding tank. And it's can be used for irrigation purposes, but what it does is gives you big bang for the buck in a very small footprint. So what we've proposed, and just wanted to run it by the board, because this is something that, all the other stuff's underground, you don't even know it's there. This is sort of not underground, and you're gonna know it's there. This is a picture of this is a photograph of the concession stand, and that is a relatively two-scale rendering of what this tank is going to look like. It's an 1,100-gallon tank that will be connected to the gutter leader system of the existing concession stand roof. It will be tucked in next to the fenced area and behind this wall, so it won't be protruding out. We're able to get a light gray tank that will match the gray trim on the concession stand. I understand it's not the most aesthetically pleasing, but this is a couple of $1,000s versus a $30,000 stormwater retrofit. This is no impact. This can be done in a day by a contractor, and the other is, a week of heavy equipment right in the middle of everything. So we came up with this. We think this is the best bang for the buck for the school. These are some stock internet photos that we found just to give some idea. The rendering is not wonderful, but it's a quick throw together just to give you a general idea of scale and proportion. These are other tanks that have been installed. It's just a big storage tank with a gutter leader coming in on the top. Just wanted to run that by you guys. And those are, that wraps up the additional DEP required stormwater for the project. Happy to answer.
There's going to be more conversations on that kind of where it sits and how it relates to the building.
So the other option is some other type of gutter system that's obviously more costly, but less.
It's not even a gutter system, it would be, are you familiar with there's an existing stormwater pond, it's a grass depression as big as this area here, it's probably 6 foot deep, right next to the concession stand. What that would require would be excavation of probably 3 to 4 feet of material out of the bottom, bringing in sand, like sand topsoil mix, putting in under drains all underneath what's there now. We'd have to run a new outlet structure and a deeper outlet pipe to get this out of here. And then go back and DEP is very particular with how you plan to, what we'd be proposing there is we retrofit that into a bioretention filter. It's one of the approved DEP treatment practices. So bioretention filter requires certain soil media, but also certain plantings. So the whole grassed area, which is now pretty easy to maintain because they just run mowers up and down it, have to be planted with shrubs, plants, and mulched. And it's become difficult. We've done this, we've been forced into doing similar things like this, or rain garden is another popular term. Rain garden is a smaller version of this bioretention filter. We've been forced into having to do this at other schools, and it's just not something the school wants. It's a lot of maintenance, and it's, the guys are already spread thin, and you don't need more stuff to take care of. So between the construction costs, the duration of construction, the impacts of construction, and the maintenance afterwards, that's why we think this is your best option, even though it's not that attractive.
Yeah, the other one seems.
So the delay for the topsoil and the grass seed for the fields,
Yes.
how do you think that's going to impact? I know it's what the weather's like is a big part of that, but how do you see that impacting the use of the fields come springtime?
Good question.
It would be naive to say it's not going to have any impact, and it depends a lot on the length of the summers reach into the fall, which is a wild card. As I talked in smaller group meetings, under the best of conditions, the fields should not be used in March. They really need to be established in the spring. This is going to have an impact. It is potentially going to have an impact into the late spring, and it is not something you can put a hard number on. We have talked with the athletic director about using the field, letting it establish in the spring and starting out by just using it for games and practicing elsewhere so that we don't put a lot of hardware on the field early in the season. But it is a factor, and it has been on our minds since the get-go. We've had a number of things that have pushed our schedule back. As you recall, we had to bid the field work 3 times, and this whole DEP process. And then, frankly, our field contractor did not start with the speed and dedication that they were hired to do and that they presented that they were going to do. So all of those things have us currently 2 weeks behind schedule on the softball fields and 4 weeks behind schedule on the baseball field. That's where we are right now.
Joe, is there anything that we could do to remedy that? I mean, we can't, with grass growing, it requires sun and...
It requires sun, and there is something we can do, and the something we can do is put sod down instead of seed. And I've had conversations with the contractor about that, and I've had conversations with it basically being done on their dime and not on your dime, because we're in this situation. In my opinion, they have a large piece of the responsibility for the situation that we're in. But that is an ongoing conversation, and as there are specific details, we will be communicating them to you.
So could I just attempt to summarize, because you threw a lot at us, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So New York City DEP has more stringent requirements than New York State DEC. Right? When the JFK edition and City Star editions were built, only New York State DEC regulations needed to be followed at that time, and those buildings were built in compliance with that.
Yes.
But since we've then added on the paving project and then the field renovations, That,
Specifically, it's the field renovations. The phasing of the work, the reason we didn't do the paving in conjunction with the other work that we were doing inside the building last summer, as a planning matter, was that we did not want to open up that ground because that would have triggered the DEC process. DEP, I'm sorry, I do that all the time. So that was a specific strategic decision that was made in concert with the district. And then we ended up triggering the DEP's involvement by increasing the work area by adding the fields.
okay, so it's the field that triggered DEP. Then I know that throughout the summer, John and Insight did a great job of going back and forth with DEP, and we were constantly feeding the contractor with updates and changes and move this there, and constantly changing the design. So that
And he was cooperative.
Yeah.
Some contractors don't want to play nice and they want to kick their heels.
We want to reach into your pocket.
They reach into your pocket. They were very cooperative and understanding of the whole situation, and they're starting to get more and more frustrated about the way this has gone, but they're all in it for you guys. It's,
Then the additional costs for all of these additional DEP requirements, what would you ballpark the cost?
I'd say it's $40,000 to $50,000 for the additional work over and above the contract.
Right. So again, unanticipated expense of almost $50,000 because of the DEP regulations. And then again, the same thing applies then to the field project, that we're limited in our ability to, attack it, how you would efficiently.
Right.
So we're performing this work in an inefficient way, but in compliance with DEP.
Correct. We had to get the project phased so that there's no more than 5 acres of disturbance opened at one time. We knew we had to get the school work, paving work done in the summer so that it's open for the first day of school, which it was. And we could do that in a softball field at the same time. That was 4.9 acres of disturbance for both of those projects. We were right under the 5-acre disturbance. So what we're doing now is, because we've got about 1.5 acres of the school parking lot stabilized, paved, final paved, and grass growing in some areas, we want to swap that 1.5 acres there for 1.5 acres on the baseball fields. So that's what we're trying to talk to DEP. This is processed as a field change. It's not a permit revision or reapproval, which opens up a can of worms. These are typically done as field change sketches and can be done within a matter of a day or two. So that's where we are as of this afternoon.
Just want to thank both of you for all of your work on this. I know it's not easy, it's extremely complicated, and we appreciate all the work you're doing on behalf of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we brought that up. So, next is our district and board goals presentation, which I guess I will start us off on that. So, one of the things a board for any district is tasked with is the direction of the district for the school year. Lucky for us, we have a 5-year plan in place that we've been working on. So each year we're starting our 3rd year now, and we just continue to build on the previous year's work, and so makes it a little bit easier for our discussion. But generally, it's the board that in the past, prior to this 5-year plan, it would be something that we would have a work session on, we did a retreat at other times to figure out the things we want to take on for the school year, and then set our superintendent kind of in motion to make those things happen. So, being that we are starting year 3 of our strategic coherence plan, I'm actually going to turn it over to Valerie to present where we're at with that and how this year is going to look regarding the district goals. And then I'll take it back and just tie in our board goals into that as well.
Sure. In the way of establishing context, last year, the 2017-18 school year was dedicated to basically making sure that we identified and streamlined the goals that were outlined, the social, emotional, and academic goals that were outlined in the strategic coherence plan. Most of you recall that the plan was approved in March of 2016. And we've steadily been working in concert with a group of educators and administrators and board members from the inception of the development of the plan with an outside consultant, Don Costa, who helped to facilitate that work here as well as other districts. So we used the last year to really make sure that we focused on 5 goals rather than 8, and that we defined those goals and developed a profile of a graduate, which was part of the work that is associated with a district really making sure that the plan represents a blueprint for how we're, what our dedication and our commitment is to 21st century learning, teaching and learning. So that was one of the first goals for 17-18, is to really define those 5 academic and social emotional skills, and to ask the principals and the schools to identify examples of how they're integrating those skills into the curriculum, into assessment, instruction, professional learning, and the learning environment. And those skills are critical thinking, collaboration, communication, adaptability, perseverance, and civic responsibility. I think when you walk around the buildings, you'll see lots of examples of those skills, and certainly our teachers have been involved in doing all those, doing the work of integrating the skills. We also wanted to make sure that everyone in the system was aware that these 5 goals were our focus. So lots of communication. Our administrators spent lots of time in the schools talking about these during the professional learning sessions that are built into the calendar, as well as during faculty meetings, the professional learning communities that go on throughout the school year. And then finally, one of the really, I think, proud moments is when we were able to establish, from work that started in 2012 actually, identify a mental health, social emotional program by having 2 mental health counselors that were hired to do the work of not only assisting students and educating staff and parents, but disseminating information, building resources, making sure that our parents were aware that those 2 mental health counselors existed. And we certainly see the evidence of that. We have a website with resources. Those 2 people have been very busy the last few days, and they in terms of their outreach to the Gonzalez family, as well as working with all the staff and students who have been impacted by that tragic loss. And complementing the clinical staff that exists now. I mean, they work very closely with the school counselors, the psychologists and social workers, and they are very present in the community. So those were the goals for 17-18. So in terms of the establishment for goals for 18-19, and as Ms. Masika mentioned earlier, the timeline for the implementation of the Strategic Coherence Plan was 2016 to 2021. And in terms of implementation, meaning to really make sure that there's a solid presence of those goals implemented, that we have examples of curriculum and resources, and classrooms look like, they're classrooms where children are collaborating and solving problems and feeling connected to the outside world, having authentic ways in which they are applying these skills. So naturally, we're poised this year to deepen the presence of those skills in the classrooms, in instruction, in curriculum, professional learning, the learning environment. So the first goal is to utilize the plan. The plan contains, and it was built to have a way in which we can monitor the implementation of the goals. So we'll use the resources attached with those to the plan to be able to find out ways in which we can further understand how to more successfully and effectively integrate the skills, what our teachers need to be to feel more successful or a greater sense of efficacy in integrating the skills. We're also using a tool that the administrators looked at over the summer called an internal coherence survey, which is a way in which we can, again, extrapolate information from the staff that would help us to better serve their needs and help them to feel as though they have opportunities to work with each other, to tell us what they need. I mean, the project-based learning work that Ms. Dosh helped to facilitate over the summer really came from a recommendation from middle school teachers. They wanted to learn more about PBL, so we brought in the Buck Institute, other faculty members across the district learned about that, heard that, and asked if they could participate. So that's the first goal, is to continue to deepen the presence of those skills and provide resources for teachers to do that. The second goal is to, which actually is connected to some of what Ellen talked about, is extending our online presence and resources, providing more snapshots of what the integration of those skills look like. The first year, well, actually it was last year, some of our teachers, and we just tapped them on the shoulder and said, do you mind if we, come in and make a little video, 7 or 8 minute video of you actually integrating a particular skill into your practices, and we have 13 short videos on that website that illustrate that. We want to continue to do that because there are great examples in the district of teachers who have been, very diligent and are very creative and, and intellectually, involved and engaged in integrating these skills. We'll offer as a medium videos and podcasts and blog posts and other ways in which the educators can talk about how they're integrating these skills and share that amongst themselves. A third goal would be to, which complements the first goal, is to use some rubrics that teachers developed, started developing last year. That work was kind of finalized in terms of a really good draft. So there are 5 rubrics to monitor critical thinking, collaboration, communication, perseverance, adaptability, and civic responsibility. Teachers will take those rubrics and start using them, and use this year to monitor, so that we all are on the same page. It was really important for us all, which was the work of last year, to come up with common definitions for these skills, so that my definition was not different from any other definition in the system. So we also want to be able to have a common understanding and a vision of what it looks like to teach children to be adaptive, to teach children to persevere. So what does that look like? So those rubrics really will help us to establish those benchmarks. And again, we're expecting our teachers to provide us with lots of feedback around how to use those, whether they're helpful, if there's certain language that needs to be clarified, and by the end of the year, the goal is to have pretty good working rubrics and other rubrics that are developed that are more grade level and age appropriate, especially at the K2 level. The fourth goal it pertains to our budget and budget development. We certainly need to have more ways to educate our public about the development of the budget, so through infographics, workshops, forums, and of that sort. We want to be able to better communicate the various components of the school budget and finance and operations, so that we don't, in a presentation that starts in March, kind of present lots of information that could presumably appear to be confusing and not, and it's the first time, that anyone hears it, obviously there are going to be lots of questions. So we want to demystify budget development by starting early and educating the public about the different components of that, and then using some online tools as well as face-to-face workshops and forums to do that. And the fifth and final goal has to do with actually the presentation that Ellen did around the media plan and the community input. Developing ways to engage the community, especially the half of our 13,634 registered voters who no longer have children in the school district. We need to keep them engaged and involved in what's going on in the district, so that when they hear things, they have a place to go to find out information before, rather than relying upon maybe sources that are not completely accurate. So this is a priority of the district, to be able to find ways, many different ways to convey that information, so that people can have information early, they know where to come, they know who to ask, and part of that is also work that Jen Trelaw is doing in the refinement of our website, to clean that up, to make that easy and more, accessible to people who do rely upon websites. So those are the 5 goals that are district goals that, as Ms. Masika said, the board then charges me, along with Michelle and Victor and Kathy and the building administrators and directors, to actually implement.
Thank you, yes. And so then the board needs more work to do. So we also have our goals for the year, and in our work session that was on August 20th, we started this discussion and outlined what our goals should be. And before I get into them, we agreed that we should decide on what they would be, but we would continue with additional work sessions in fine-tuning the how, and utilizing whatever resources and our efforts together that we can, with us, with the community, et cetera, and making it happen. So essentially there were 2 goals that we identified, 2 areas, 1 goal, 2 areas, and 6 subsections having to do with communication, and how we can improve that, aligning ourselves with the work that's being done in the district, our strategic coherence plan, and how we can do to better communicate what we as a board do, what the district is doing, and getting it out there. And so 2 areas were the community and the district. There's like an internal component and an external component. Within that, the community, there are the parents, there are the many organizations that live within the town, as well as the residents who no longer have students in the district. And so 3 areas within our community that we identified, and needing to make sure that we're reaching them and connecting, communicating. And with the district, essentially, it's our students, our teachers, and our administration. And how can we connect with those areas as, groups of people as well. And so that was identified as the work, and then we were brainstorming ideas, and I wrote some down, and we're going to have another work session to kind of fine-tune next steps for us and what we're going to do. I was thinking if there were meetings that kind of help us with time, because there's so much work on our plate. If we don't have a reason to have an executive session before a board meeting, perhaps we could use that 1 hour time period, even if it's once a month, first meeting of the month or something, as a work session piece, just to kind of work on these things. And in work sessions, of course, are our time to work and for public observation and are filmed, but there's no interaction with the public at all. That's just for us to hash out details. And so some of the ideas that we came up with and how we're going to do that started with, we had a discussion on our agenda and how we can fine-tune managing our meetings to be the most effective and productive for the board and the work we need to do, as well as for the community in communicating with us. And the board meeting, we thought, was not the most effective way. We need additional, as Valerie mentioned, we need additional avenues to allow for an actual exchange and a dialogue with the community. And there are many ideas for that. We were going to put out a survey. We're going to put out a survey and start with that, as well as, let's see, what else did I write down here? Community forums on specific topics that we can identify that this will be the topic and the purpose of that forum, for people to come out and engage in that discussion. For example, when it's budget time, that would be something we could be there for and have that exchange. What else? Updating our webpage on the website, very specific to us, and how we can put there perhaps a link for kind of an inbox. So I know people do email the board directly, but that could be another way. Just you click on that link and just type something in a box. I've seen other websites, other districts do that. And in my conversations with districts, I got some great ideas and other things they do. And they do things, for example, like they have set budget Saturdays, or they have their first Saturday of the month is just coffee chat time with the board. And just the board at a location in the community that is just open for 2 hours, someone's there, and it's not to get into heavy discussion, or like if we can't answer certain things, we need legal sometimes, but just to have that opportunity in the face-to-face. We discussed the newsletter, and what else? There's one other thing I wanted to mention here. Oh, evaluation of the board. That was another thing we discussed, that so a board needs to also do its own evaluation of itself and how we're performing on our own benchmarks that we set for ourselves. And it was raised perhaps to also put that, it's an instrument, it has, you can mark it off accordingly, and put that out to the public as well, and perhaps the district, to have the outside world also evaluate us, to help us in being the most effective we can in the work we're doing. So again, we're brainstorming a lot of ideas. We're, going to continue that conversation. As we have that information, we'll put it out to the public to update everyone on how we're achieving our goals for the year in improving on communication and transparency for the district. I think I kind of covered a lot of things there. Good. Okay. So we move on to Code of Conduct feedback report.
Thank you. So at the August 21st meeting, we had our state mandated public hearing. And at that time, there were no comments, but we discussed putting it back on the agenda to see what type of feedback we received in the meantime. We put a letter out with a survey asking for feedback. We have received none. So I could send another letter saying, here's the survey again. Or we
what's
could
the
put it on the
timeline
agenda.
on, I know we have to do a certain amount of notice to the public for comment, and then you close it and we move forward with it. Is it September type, is it September?
We should approve it in September.
Yeah. So we could just put it on the next agenda.
Okay. And would you like me to put out the survey reminder again?
I don't think so, I think at
Okay.
this point. We've done 2 meetings worth of information and requests, and at that point, we need to have it in place already to approve it, so.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so then we have our discussion on our superintendent search firms. Okay, so I was tasked with calling districts who've used firms that we interviewed, and they were actually really great conversations. And it's funny how I happened to reach their board presidents, and just how they just started talking about so many other things in their districts. Some conversations were not just a quick, did you like them or not? It turned into 30 minutes to 2 hours of, what do you do in your district? Because I thought, why reinvent some wheels? If people are having great success with work they're doing, we should build on that. So I have notes on things for other discussions. But for this, generally, what can I say? People liked who they used. So, what I kind of tried to key in on, this is my chicken scratch, were the districts who perhaps used one of the firms we had, and then for whatever reason in the next search switched away from them, or had someone and switched to one of the firms we were using. And I thought those would be a little telling to me as to why. And there was really one district that had something to say about that, because another district who switched, there was a conflict of employees. And they didn't want to use the firm again because now there was a conflict of who lived in the district and who knew who or something. And they loved them, but that was fine. One district, they did ask, I get to speak, for me to speak collectively for all of them. They had used, for example, I'll speak to each of them. So school leadership, they had used school leadership, but they didn't blame school leadership as much as something in the process that was missed, because the superintendent that was hired ended up being just a not good fit from both parties. Very shortly within the first year, everybody wanted to part ways. And so they just said, let's just try a different firm. And they continued to use outside firms, not OCs. for no reason in particular. They said BOCES was great, but we just liked the way these other firms presented the amount of work and the way they did the work they did. When I talked to other districts who used an outside firm but switched to BOCES, and there were actually two. One who used an outside firm and switched to BOCES and is part of our component district, and another who our BOCES does not represent them. They're part of another BOCES, but they just felt our BOCES actually was better suited to do the work. Both of those districts loved what BOCES did and thought when, from having gone from using an outside firm to the work BOCES did, they felt the savings was worth the work. And another interesting thing was another district said when using BOCES, well, BOCES presented a plan, and I know that was a question at the last meeting. Hold on, I did bring it just to kind of review it real quick. Give me 1 second. I have a few piles here. It's not in that one. Sorry. I'm keeping track of too many things. Oh, here it is, on top. So, just to kind of review, well, first to finish. So they said that they were able, BOCES worked with them diligently, and they strayed from the plan. So what BOCES presented to them as the work that they would do in their outline, that particular district had a very clear vision on how they wanted to gather information from their community and what they wanted BOCES to be able to do, and they said they did all that. So that was a little comforting in terms of, for example, I mentioned last time when we discussed Ray and Associates, they had a very detailed approach that's very different than anything we've done before with BOCES and school leadership, having used both of them. And it appealed to me. I thought it was much more detailed. So it gave me some thought that perhaps BOCES could do some similar work as to what Ray and Associates does if we were to have a discussion with them. But just to review what BOCES does, because again, it was a question at the last meeting, their general outline is that they have a planning session, if they were to be hired, with the board and them as the consultant. And then the next step would be to gather input from the staff, the parents, the community, and establish search criteria, develop a recruitment brochure, and prepare the advertisements. And then going from there, they would do an internal posting, they would advertise and mail to universities and other, publications that they did outline, for example, Education Week, LinkedIn, On Board, and other educational resources. And then from there, they screen and interview all the applications that come in and do reference checks, and the application process closes. At that point, they meet with the board to select semifinalists and set up interview dates. The first round of semifinalists are interviewed by the board, we establish finalists, and then from there, depending on how we decide to structure that second round of interviews, committee groups can meet and also be part of that process. And then we have another interview with the board, and we go forward from there. So with last week's question, I think it was, is it just a posting and then there's just an interview, but it's actually very detailed with community input throughout the process. And again, another district really, they wanted to really make sure that they were connected with the community as well as how they saw the district and to bring all the pieces together. And always just being mindful that, it's input and it's recommendations and thoughts that we take into consideration in forming the decision that we need to make for the district. So, there were people who definitely said, I will say this, with Ray and Associates, because that was a concern that they don't have much experience in New York. And they are actually one of the oldest, if not the oldest search firms in the country, which I found interesting. For whatever reason, they just aren't as entrenched in New York, but they have done, they did a STEM academy in Connecticut, they did Greenwich, Connecticut, they've done a few districts in Long Island, they've done Rochester. And I'll say though, interestingly enough, it was harder for me to connect with people in those districts than it was with the other the districts for some reason. And the Long Island firms that use them said they would definitely use them again. The reason they chose them was they wanted that fresh set of eyes that you had mentioned, having just someone not connected with the district, just really having a different perspective and coming in and interpreting all the information that's gathered and seeing what they make of that. And those, of course, who did use BOCES said that they liked that there was a connection and an understanding already built in. So it really came down to the identity of the district and what the needs were and what the board decided that they were looking for. And then for some, cost played a factor. And some felt that cost, they weren't looking at that at all, and others said they definitely were going to make the decision based on that savings. And just to point out, because it was brought to my attention with Rain Associates, and this is going back over 10 years ago, they did a search for a state in the Midwest, and apparently with all of their background checks and all the searches they did, they somehow missed some information. And apparently the person who was hired to actually run this for the state, I mean, the structure's different in whichever state that was. So it wasn't for school district, it was for the state actually, and the person who got the job actually lied on their resume and in some references, and apparently somehow when they did all that work, it was covered up nicely by that person, but eventually it was uncovered, and so it became a problem, and they were concerned that maybe they missed it. But that was the only time, it was over 10 years ago, you know, Greenwich, Connecticut was like, they knew of that and it wasn't a concern for them. Another district said that was a concern for them. And yeah, so what else can I say about, anyway, are there specific questions you may have, anybody that I may have gotten that you want to hear what anyone said about a particular district? And you've had experience with two already. The other thing with school leadership, one district said that when they met with them, they thought with trying to match with personalities, they requested that someone else be matched with them based on who was going to work with them, and they felt, we like firm, but we would like to work with someone else perhaps. And they worked with that. And again, just to clarify, because I think from last meeting it was a little unclear, school leadership was actually the firm that said we would get a discount for if we used them again. I think it was misquoted in the paper as being Rain Associates, but that wasn't school leadership, because that is who we've worked with before. Yeah.
Did any of the districts who use BOCES say anything about a concern that the reach wasn't as far, or they didn't feel like they were getting candidates from as large a pool as possible?
So actually, no, that not being an issue. What actually, I don't recall which district, but one of the districts specifically said that they were thankful because they weren't sure, they had gone with an outside firm before, they were thinking to use BOCES. And ironically, someone who was interviewing for the superintendent position in their district was also interviewing in another district. The other district used an outside firm, and they used BOCES. And what they really recognized, and they were from out of state, was that essentially the pool is what the pool is. And so where they advertise is where everyone's advertising, and it goes nationally. And the other thing is that if people are going to choose to interview for whatever their personal reasons may be, and who puts the information out there won't affect if a person chooses to apply here or not. And they found, again, it just happened to be ironic, and they were thankful in the end that they went with BOCES because they saved, realizing that the pool would have been the same. But again, what really came down to were just the style of the different companies and the personality of the district and who they just felt more comfortable working with. So.
I feel like when we've listened to the three make their presentations, all three of them said that they were going to advertise for the position in the exact same periodicals, in the exact same manner. I mean, this is a superintendent of schools. This is not, this is a very specific position that certain people are qualified and certain people aren't. So I think the pool will be the same. I mean, I just can't imagine that one of these companies will provide us with some number of candidates that another can't. And I think that we have to consider the cost. I mean, some districts made that their defining thing. I don't know if it's our defining thing, but I mean, you know, we've listened tonight about additional costs for the fields, additional costs for this, and, yeah, I'm, you know, leaning toward BOCES because of that.
I mean, it kind of comes down to the conversation earlier regarding BOCES for communication specialists versus a private individual. You know, you do have to take into account cost. So.
I have to say, BOCES, one of the things I did like that you mentioned is the word flexibility. And you said BOCES gives that opportunity as opposed to the other firms. I don't know if you asked that question as well, those other firms, but pointing that out in regards to BOCES structured, they can, you know, go in a different direction. If we choose to ask that, they sound really flexible versus, I don't know, the other firms.
Yeah, and generally with the other firms, everyone has an outline, but it seemed like the districts who went with the outside firms went with them because of the structure of how they're going to do everything, do the work. So it didn't seem like they wanted to or needed to adjust much to that. But that conversation did come up with BOCES, and they were flexible.
I like BOCES. I think that's a bit tricky. You want to have some flexibility there. If you see something, you're recruiting for the person. You want that person to be, you're choosing to hire. So if that decision is being held upon you, you have to have some kind of flexibility in that decision making.
And actually, I'll add another point. So Ray and Associates, I did speak to, it was the STEM Academy in Connecticut, Barrow STEM Academy. They ended up, it was actually for their principals that they used the firm. And for whatever reason, they said we just had issues, they kind of were having turnovers with principals. And so they had to do another search, and they did say they would do that for free. And that's why they were with them, because they liked that built-in, we'll do a second search for you at no cost. School leadership didn't mention any of that, I don't think. I don't recall them talking about cost or no cost. And BOCES, one of the districts, the search didn't produce results that they felt were appropriate fits for the district, and they hired an interim, and they continued doing the search, and of course BOCES continued to do the work, just, you know, putting out the net again. So just to comment on that as well.
Did they also, I asked BOCES about the customer satisfaction on the survey, what was the percentile? Did you get any feedback from those other individuals as well? Did they have a customer satisfaction ratio, what their percentile were?
As far as?
Were they satisfied with the survey?
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, I mean, again, the complaints that people had, and they even said like the community was happy with the outcome and stuff. The concerns were, in the few that existed, because again, people were happy with, you know, the work that was done by all of them, but where in the end, once the person was there, potentially the fit that was made, if it wasn't a great one, and they weren't sure where that breakdown happened, so that's why they would just try another firm. But no, I mean, people were generally pleased with the work being done. Do you guys?
BOCES, I mean, I think they're the most familiar with us, and I think it's the most financially responsive.
I mean, there's no reason to think we're going to get better candidates, and there's no reason to think we can't affect the process the way that we feel like we need to. And we've used them before and we've liked them. I don't know why we wouldn't go with BOCES and pay more for somebody else.
Okay. Okay, so good.
Get the contract with me.
I need to reach out to everyone and let them know, and then, yeah, we'll go forward, and we'll be sure to make, the communities informed of our process along the way, and we'll do regular updates and everything. Okay, so I have to just check, and I might have messed this up. So thank you everyone for being patient with my adjusting to this role. When I added number 7 to discuss policy 5152, I did take a motion in a second. Did we vote on that? Did we all raise our hands? No. Okay. So we had a motion to amend the agenda to add number 7 to our discussion. We had a motion in a second. I don't need to vote. All those in favor to add in the agenda. Thank you very much. So it passes 6-0. Sorry, thank you. Okay, so now discussion. So we can't get into some of the aspects that we discussed with the attorney, but we do need to discuss the policy. And so just to kind of clarify for everyone, so we have a policy committee that does, review the policies. Technically, the only committee that's mandated by the state is the audit committee. But you see the work that we do and the time commitment. So the board actually sets the policies, which become the rules of how we run our district. But for us to do that work, we just need to live here full time. So we put in place a committee to do that work and then report back the different reads and the recommendations, the legal and everything else, and how they come down to the state. But in this case, we can review this one policy and just have a discussion on it in light of our, residency updated information and just kind of have a discussion about it. So the policies about the admission of non-resident students, I think I could, start with, there was a time, it was before me, that the district did allow non-resident students to pay tuition, I think, and attend, or perhaps I think there were teachers that had children who, came and there were things. But over time, that was discussed. Again, wasn't here for that, but was discussed, and it was eventually phased out for many reasons. And so, I guess the discussion is that we're in the midst of students who have been here for a long time, and how we should address the procedure we have put in place through our process with our task force, and the many discussions that I've had and we've had with SED, who approved the process and the steps we put into place to do this work. And so the question really comes to us: do we want to amend this policy from what it currently says in any way, or do we want to stay with the policy as it is written and the procedures we have in place and follow what is outlined by New York State law and and the procedure that is, we have a process in the district of what we're doing, but there's also an outline by the state of what happens with students who are determined to be non-residents, and that's defined by education law. So we can, which is what's outlined in our policy, that right now we follow the procedures under education law for students who are deemed to be non-residents. Or is there any discussion that we need to have on amending this policy to change any aspect of that? So,
Well, as part of the policy committee, I know the amount of work that goes into reviewing policies. Legal's consulted at every step of the way. To just change it at this point, I don't see the need for it. So I say the policy remains as is. Anybody else does, but.
No need to comment, I think.
Well, I think the danger in amending the policy at this point, when we've taken the steps to verify the residency of the students, raises the possibility that some students are going to be treated differently. It could sort of undermine some of the purposes of the residency verification to begin with. We know that there are situations that have come to light that are dealing with residency and border properties. We know that that's part of the issue, is that we border another state. But I'm hesitant to take steps to change a policy that's been in place because of the results of a verification process because I think it opens the door to a lot of problems for the district, or potential problems for the district.
And since SED has been involved every step of the way, they know our policy. There's been no recommendations made, so you do have to acknowledge SED's part in all of this process as well.
And that's what I was gonna say, SED. I wouldn't step forward and change the policy right now. I would leave the way it is. Like Diane says, SED's been involved, and they've given us directions on the steps we need to take, and I would not move forward on changing the policy right now.
I agree. I think we need to adhere to the policy we currently have in place. But I would like to add to those families who question it, they do have, there's a protocol for them to follow that they can question or appeal, whatever the case is, further if they choose to do so. But currently, I think we need to leave it as is.
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that our policy is actually makes for more allowances in certain situations than the state law requires, that we're actually already more lenient. And to Kristen's point, there are other avenues for the process to continue, so I think changing the policy at this point is probably a mistake.
Well, I can add that in the conversations I had with SED, the discussion did come up, absolutely, what happens with, in the process, and you're at the end of the process, and what's the decision, how are the verdicts made? And they did say, to look at them case by case, and to, of course, never, affect the student until a final determination is made, and that the appeal process does exist. I mean, they were very clear on pointing out that we follow, in those cases, our policies and consult with our attorney, and that there is a procedure for them to appeal any decision as well. So it doesn't mean it's necessarily closed door until it officially is. And there are costs to be considered, of course, but I think maybe to Carrie's point of the integrity of the work we've set out to do and the discussions we've had with SED and making sure that we're doing this the best way we possibly can, and that for each case as it comes up, to be presented to the board, and then if families so choose, can always appeal, and the commissioner can find a different ruling based on the evidence that how they perceive it or interpret it, or whatever.
And we're bound by whatever decision the commissioner makes.
Right.
Well, and I think that our policy, that part of the policy that allows for the superintendent to decide to allow a student who is going into a senior year, who maybe the family moved that year, to allow them to stay, that's a reflection of decisions from the commissioner. So the commissioner
understands that.
Recognizes some amount of leniency that should be applied, and obviously whatever the commissioner tells us, decides in any given situation, the district's going to abide by.
Okay, so then, are there any other comments or thoughts on this? We're good. We're going to leave things as is regarding our policy and continue with the work as we've outlined. Do you have?
No, I didn't have anything else, sorry.
Yeah, okay. So the next thing then is our action items. What I'd like to do is first take a motion to amend our agenda to add number 8, the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES communications contract. I need a motion and a second, Diane and Carrie. And all those in favor? Passes 6-0. Thank you. And what I'd like to do next is just specifically to any action items, not any other public comment, but if anyone has any comment alone on any of the action items listed, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak before we go through them, so we can take into consideration any thoughts you may have. No? Okay, thank you. So, first action item, approval of cross-country overnight trip for Invitational in Jackson, New Jersey, September 28th to 29th, 2018.
Yes, thank you. This involves 14 student athletes on the cross-country team, as well as 2 coaches. Coach Scalia and his staff has fulfilled all the paperwork requirements for this trip. Another example of how he keeps his program, both cross-country and track, at the top of its game. So we recommend it for your approval.
Okay, great. I need a motion. Kristen and Carrie, thank you. And motion second. Questions or comments? Sorry. Second reading. Yeah, any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Okay, action item, approval of MTSS plan.
Attached in board docs is our multi-tiered system of support plan for the 2018-19 school year. This plan outlines how we identify and support students in need in a really systemic way, K-12, so that we make sure no students fall through the cracks. We want to avoid, as Dr. Henry Piedmont says, the wait to fail model. So we sat with K-12 staff over the summer to revise this, and it was actually pretty gratifying because in revising it, we saw as a group how much more sophisticated we were with the processes and with the language and the approach that we take. So it's a testament to the good work being done in the buildings.
Thank you. Okay, so I need a motion, Eric, and a second, Kristen. And are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Approval of memorandum of agreement with private school Green Chimneys.
Thank you. So as you probably remember from our previous presentations on title grants, we serve as a lead educational agency for private schools that are within our boundaries. So as part of the requirement of the grant, we need to have a written agreement for what we call a neglected facility. We don't call it, the state refers to the Green Chimneys as a neglected facility. So this MOA outlines the responsibilities of both Green Chimneys and us as a lead educational agency and what we need to do to execute the requirements of the grant.
Okay, thank you. Motion, please, Glenn, and a second, Eric. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Approval of agreements with tutoring companies, Creative Tutoring, Inc., and The Learning Shop, Inc.
Yes, thank you. So these are 2 of the 3 agencies that we contract with annually. There will be a third one forthcoming. They have to get one more piece of insurance paperwork for us. But these agreements outline what the rates would be, and these are what we would use. These are agencies that we would use if students were out on home tutoring.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion, please? Kristen, and a second, Eric. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Approval of award of contracts pursuant to competitive bids. A, plumbing services. B, HVAC services. C, boiler and burner services. And D, electrical services.
These are
That's not you.
these are our annual service and repair contracts for our facilities upkeep, and I just wanted to thank Andy Bates, Kenny Lynch, and Teresa Sullivan for going through the competitive bidding process, which is very time consuming, but it's always good for the district that we get the best price for our services.
Thank you. May I have a motion? Glenn, and a second, Diane. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Approval of 2018-19 instructional services contracts for A, the Amherst School, B, Four Winds Hospital, C, Green Chimneys, and D, Mount Pleasant Cottage School.
These are instructional contracts for our students who are placed out of district due to extenuating circumstances. They've been reviewed by our attorneys and are being recommended for approval by Ms. Kennedy.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Carrie, and a second, Diane. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. 7. award of purchase contracts for instructional, athletic, and custodial supplies pursuant to competitive bids.
This is the award of the contracts for all of our instructional, athletic, and custodial supplies. Back in March, we asked the board for their authorization so they can participate in a cooperative purchasing arrangement with Clarkstown as the lead agency. We're now asking the board to approve the award of bids to various vendors. And as you can see from the supporting documentation, very advantageous for the district to participate in this consortium, and there's a good level of cost.
Thank you. May I have a motion, Kristen, and a second, Glenn? Any questions or comments? Other than thank you for finding ways to save money. All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. And number 8 was the contract. So, it's just to kind of comment. So this contract was posted on our previous meetings.
We initially discussed it.
Or docs, yes, so it is for public, it was for public viewing at our last meeting, for reference. It's the same contract.
It's also for this one, too.
And, on this one as well. So, just wanted to comment on that, and, first need a motion and a second, Kristen and Diane, and, comments, discussion, on this. We discussed it earlier, we went through it. Is there anything else we'd like to comment?
So just, I have faith that BOCES is potentially is able to provide a good service. I think it's important for communications and things like that to be outsourced. I don't think administrators and teachers and everybody should be carrying the water on not only teaching and doing their jobs, but also getting the word out about that. I like that. The reason I'm going to vote no is just because I am concerned even with the conversation. I don't know where Eric Gross's contract fits in on this. And I'm not comfortable necessarily with the redundancy of potentially $14,000 or $15,000 to him and another $50,000 to BOCES, so that's why I'm going to vote no.
So until, and that's fine, until if there were to be able to be a new contract with them or revision, but that's not tonight, so.
If there was some assurances from him that he said, listen, it is, I would have loved for him to have been here tonight and have this conversation with him. I have a great deal of respect for him. He's been doing this in Putnam County for a very long time. I think he does have a lot of knowledge, which I don't think is unimportant. But just from a pure financial aspect, paying twice for the same service is giving me pause.
And I understand, that's understandable. I think what would be good then for us is when we do have our follow-up conversation with Mr. Gross, to present that to the public at that point, and to be very clear on where the distinction will be, and just, to your point, because we want to make sure that we're not double spending on the same job.
And it may be necessary to add them in the contract.
Yes, yeah. Okay, any other?
The 57, at the end of the year, we get reimbursed 40% of that, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
So it brings it down to 37.
Okay.
Ish.
And again, it's a one-year contract, and we can, I have to say that it was totally just coincidence that in making my calls that, because I was asking about how was BOCES with research, so they just brought up, well, they've also been great with, and for the few districts that I did speak to that do use them for something like this, they were very, very pleased at the night and day outcome of how it was before and how it is after the work they're doing. So I'm optimistic. I mean, we'll see, and we can see how the end of the year looks, and we can always make a new decision for next year. Okay, any other comments? No? Okay, so vote. All those in favor? 5. All those opposed? 1. Abstentions? Passes 5-1. Yes. Okay. Now we are at our consent agenda. This we just do all in one, yeah? So I just need a. You haven't heard from me tonight yet.
Just in consent agenda, I just want to explain a little bit why we have a consent agenda for special education and personnel items. There are so many items, I counted the personnel actions on this agenda tonight, there are 72 of them.
Right.
So if we were to do an action item on every one of those, we would be here for a very long time. So that's the purpose of the consent agenda. It's sent to you, to the Board of Education, a week at a time, so you get a chance to review it, and you get a chance to ask any questions. So when you come to the meeting, you're already prepared and you know what to expect on the consent agenda.
Thank you for that. Anything else that you want to clarify with this particular consent agenda? No? Okay, thank you. I need a motion. Diane, and a second, Carrie. Any questions or comments on this consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion passes 6-0. Now we move on to board remarks and any committee updates.
League season hasn't really started yet.
It's about to. Trying to think. No, okay, any other comments on anything? Okay, so we move on to public remarks. And just as a reminder to public, you please come up to the podium, state your name, and you'll have 2 minutes to comment. We'll hear your comments and take note and reply either at a future meeting, or if you would like a more immediate response, please feel free to email us directly and we can reply at that point. Can I just ask if to make it easier, so I know we talked about possibly doing it, but it might be helpful if you kind of just watch the clock for us, because I'm trying to do both and we'd like to be able to be fully attentive to people speaking and just kind of wrap up. So thank you. If you'd like to come up first, I saw you raise your hand, please. Or is there a microphone? Yeah, because I need you to face the board, so that would be fine. Thank you.
It's my good side. Okay. So I'm Dan Stockfield, and first of all, I just wanted to thank the board for your time and consideration, having me give the presentation a few weeks ago. And I pitched the idea back in November, and I'm actually very happy today. I hope Brewster realizes that our communication situation last year was, well, I think we all know what it was. And today is actually a success that we're going to start with BOCES, and it's all going to change. And I think that's a great thing. So I'm actually very happy today. It was mentioned to me that perhaps I'd look into a job with BOCES by somebody, but that wasn't my goal. My goal wasn't to get a job. I'm here to help our district. I have a son who's 13 going through the district, and my older son went through already. And that's what my goal was. So today was, like I said, it's a very good day for me, I think for all of us. I did have a bunch of parents in Brewster ask me in the spring to run for the board. And I also spoke with 2 board members about the same thing. And it was explained to me I can't do both. I can't be on the board and do communications. So I opted to pass on running for the board. But I would like to volunteer my time to the board. My expertise, I have an extensive background in communications, public relations, and also I have a minor degree in creative studies, which is creative problem solving. So I'd like to offer myself to the board, perhaps help with the committee that's being generated. Please use me to pick ideas. I'm sitting on a mountain of ideas that I've generated over the past 9 months, and I would love to share them with you. And also the woman from BOCES pulled me aside outside, and she loves the idea also. Anyway, I want to see BOCES succeed. And one last thing, I also conducted is that time?
Yeah, just finish up real quick.
I conducted a creative problem solving facilitation with 10 parents a couple months ago, and I'm going to present to the board in writing via email. We come up with 200 concerns, and I helped them turn into 200 ideas. Okay. So good news is coming to the board.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please.
I'm Scott Seaman. I just wanted to follow up on some of the action items I saw. I saw there are resignations from the school psychologist and the music teacher. I know there is a filing right now for the school psychologist. I'm curious if they're looking to refill the position for the music teacher. And I also wanted to thank the board for approving the cross-country trip. My son has now suckered me into working with the cross-country. Quick question related to that, especially tied to all the field work that's going on. There's a rumor that the Bear Classic is in danger because of the change of the field and the way the field's going to run. We're not sure if we're not going to be able to touch, obviously, the softball, baseball, and the other fields, and there might have to be alterations. So I'm asking in advance, since there's only about a month, to what we need to do to get it to the point where we can go ahead. If there's anything the community, the town, the police department, everybody needs to do to make sure that this does go ahead. And one last question. I saw on the calendar a while ago, there was some type of multi-denominational prayer vigil to be held on the 13th, and it's hence fallen off the school calendar. I'm not sure if that was a real thing or I was just having a moment when I was sitting up late at night looking at the computer. And I just want to see if there was any information at all about that, if there was something that was going to go ahead, especially in light of everything that has recently gone on. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please.
Hi, my name is Rich Hargrave. Was here with my wife Pam and RJ, who's a junior at Brewster High School. Apparently he's already got some past due homework that he had to get to, so he couldn't stay much later. He's worked very hard. He's been an honor student for several years. He's been on Brewster lacrosse team for the last 4 years. My daughter Lindsay was Brewster class of 2013. She recently graduated from the University of Rhode Island, magna cum laude. She's also very active, or was very active in Brewster lacrosse. She raced on the Brewster ski team for 7 years as well. We've been residents of Brewster for 25 years. I've been living in our current home, 754 Milltown Road, for the last 17 years. My wife and I are both very active supporters and advocates of this board and the new president. When we voted last May, our goal was the same as most in our community. We wanted to see some common sense policies established and enforced to address what appeared to be an influx of illegal students, among other things. We don't want to see any child lose their right to an education, but believe that the former system was ineffective in regulating and enforcing local policies. Before buying our current home 17 years ago, which is on property that the Connecticut line, state line, intersects, we contacted the Brewster School District and asked for their determination on whether or not our children could attend Brewster schools. It was confirmed that they could in writing. And I provided a copy of that letter to Mr. Carlson. Until 2.5 weeks ago, our residency has never been questioned. This past June, we re-registered our son as requested, provided tax bills, utility receipts, New York State driver's licenses, and then on August 23rd, 11 days before the start of the school year, we were notified that a new survey would be required on our property to establish residency. The purpose of my statement today is twofold. First, I wanted to ensure the task force and the board understand that the current residency verification process may ultimately harm and disrupt the current Brewster students and their families, which I know is not the intended outcome.
So we're at for 2 minutes, if you could ask you just close up your thoughts.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are other implications as well. Will these impacted students be able to receive in-state rates for SUNY schools, for example? What about the property values of the homes of these designated properties that would now be part of the Danbury School District? These are very real concerns of ours. So I really just wanted to communicate what I thought would be fair and reasonable guidance around the policy. And that is, it would be in the best interest of our residents, the district, and most importantly for the students to grandfather any property that's in question, a total of 3, I believe, to continue to receive the current level of district services indefinitely. This includes any property that currently falls on state lines and currently receives Brewster district services. Ultimately, that protects our real estate values, ensures our students continue to receive uninterrupted education in Brewster and within New York State. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Danielle Wortman, and I have been a resident of the Brewster Southeast since 2005 for the past 13 years. I moved into Brewster with my husband in 2010, and we purchased our current home on Milltown Road. Our property is one of the properties that is recently come into question regarding our residency. Our home was built in 1993 and has an established residency that has been well documented for the past 25 years with the Brewster School District. Since 1993, all children that have resided within our home through 3 different owners have been designated as Brewster School District students. At the end of July, we did receive this notification that our residency had come into question, and made a reference to a revised policy that I later discovered was only adopted in August of 2016 and did not exist prior to that, and that's specifically the clause about the border dwelling policy. Prior to that, we did meet and establish the criteria that was set at the time of our purchase. And I just wanted to know that why would the Board of Education not specifically, since it only affects a small amount of us, why we weren't notified in writing of basically a policy that bumps us out of the district. To date, we have provided approximately 11 pieces of residency information, far exceeding the 2 documents that are required to prove residency in our state and in our town. We reside nowhere else. We have also become aware that other families in the district that share a specific situation have been being handled differently, and it is my impression that my 3 young daughters are being unfairly targeted because we attend a parochial school and we are not receiving in-district classroom instruction. I feel like my daughters are going to be made an example of and serve as collateral damage to the policies that are randomly adopted and arbitrarily enforced. We feel like our property serves with precedence, and that the revisions should not be reflective to our situation. In Board of Education meetings, I have reviewed over time. I have seen that it was going to be handled on a case-by-case basis under consultation of legal consult, and I was not afforded that. When I attended the Brewster meeting, there was only one person involved in the hearing who made, yes, I understand, who basically was making the determination prior to the actual meeting that we did not have to be in presence, and that basically that the meeting was just a formality, that it had to go to the state to go through the process. I feel like we've done nothing wrong. We've been transparent. We feel like this whole experience has been very unnecessary, and that it has put an extreme financial burden and stress on my family. We currently do not have transportation, which has been creating chaos in the mornings since my girls have been in school for about a week at this point.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Okay. Then we do not have, I don't believe, a need for executive session this evening. So I think we can. Yeah. So, yeah, so we can, I think, just adjourn the meeting. We have no executive session after this time. Okay.
Let's go.
So I'm motion to adjourn the meeting tonight. Carrie, and second, Diane, sorry. And all those in favor? 6-0, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.